Every top-rank hunter wanted me to join their guild, all because I showed up at the Hunter Association's selection exam, looking like a broke, unemployed teenager just searching for a job. But I literally used nothing but my bare fists to one-shot every single opponent, and honestly, it was just tough. Even the Academy's top genius could only last a few seconds against me before I sent Lil Bro flying through the air. Seeing this, the examiners and the rest of the participants were completely shocked. In the end, a top-tier hunter decided to personally test my skills. Even against him, I managed to tank his attacks and push him right back. Just when he finally decided to end the fight, that's when I showed him my true power. My black flames, a mysterious power that swallows up all fatigue and gives me almost endless stamina. But how did I get this insanely strong? The truth is, I was once summoned to another world as a hero and fought monsters there for 20 years. After countless battles, I finally reached the Demon King alongside my companions, who were honestly just deadweight fur. While they were just supporting from the back, I was out here soloing the Demon King. The two of us were absolutely cooking on equal terms. The Demon King kept spamming lightning attacks, telling me to bow down and claiming he'd build a kingdom according to his own will. But there wasn't a single hint of fear on my face. We kept trading devastating blows back and forth. But after a while, I got tired of the yapping and decided it was time to end this fight once and for all. I powered up my spear with my unique skill, Paradox Flame, and unleashed it right at the boss. The resulting explosion was so massive that it blasted the monster away, shattering giant boulders along the path. After that, we threw hands again, moving so fast that everyone else watching looked like little kids compared to us. I managed to land a clean hit on the monster, but he arrogantly claimed that the attack did absolutely nothing to him. I let him know that this exact arrogance was about to cost him heavily. I cloaked my spear in flames and delivered a sharp slash across his body. This time, he fully realized just how bad of a situation he was in. He admitted he never expected anyone could actually bring him down. I told him straight up that I don't even belong to his trash world, because the very people I call my companions are actually just waiting for me to fall in battle. Right then, the saint cut in, saying she couldn't believe she was listening to the words of a monster. I addressed her first. I pointed out how she had been pretending to love me all this time, when the reality was she despised me just because I wasn't from this world. Every single attempt at seduction was a calculated plot to make it impossible for me to fight back when the time came to eliminate me. She stood there speechless because I caught her red-handed. I went on to say that the mage and the knight were no different. The emperor had already rewarded the knight with a national treasure just to take me out, all because the emperor was terrified that I might usurp his throne. Meanwhile, the mage hated my guts because I opposed the slavery system, while he was obsessed with running twisted experiments on humans. I looked at them and let them know my ball knowledge on their betrayal was unmatched. I had known about their entire scheme for the past 5 years. Hearing this, even the monster was shocked and asked why, if I possessed such overwhelming power, I didn't just rule the world myself. I told him I had zero interest in that. All I wanted was to go back home. 20 years ago, back in 2005, I was just an ordinary 20-year-old office worker living on Earth. But then, a goddess summoned me to this world, claiming I was chosen to save it. The moment I arrived, I realized what a nightmare of a world I had been dropped into. I searched for every possible way to return to Earth, but the goddess made it clear there was only one path. So, I locked in and started training to fight. This world was far more broken than I could have ever imagined. Once, I saved a child from the battlefield, but the soldiers guarding the village refused to let him in. They straight up told me to let him die since he was already on the verge of passing away anyway. It was a twisted world where, instead of treating the wounded, they just abandoned them. The terrible state of their medicine and hygiene made things even worse. I literally saw them remove a soldier's leg over a minor infection. Somehow, I managed to bring the kid inside the village, but a new problem was already waiting for me. The religious fanatics, the village's cult leaders, decided that the boy only survived because he was possessed by a demon. They claimed that to purge the demon, they had to sacrifice him in the fire, using their rituals as an excuse. For them, destroying a child in the flames like firewood was absolutely nothing. Despite all that madness, I survived for the next 20 years, and now I had finally defeated the monster and saved this world. The scientist among them sighed in relief, saying he was glad I finally understood why they couldn't let me leave here alive. I turned toward him and told him exactly how much I utterly despise this world. In that exact moment, he realized he didn't have the aura to stand against me. Alra bro. It clicked for him that in trying to contain one monster, they had successfully bred an even bigger monster. I looked up at the sky and shouted at the goddess to fulfill her promise, because I did exactly what she asked of me. I saved this world. Right then, the sky split open, and the goddess descended before me. She began praising me for enduring so much, but I didn't care about her aura farming. I sternly reminded her of her promise to send me back home. She asked if I truly hated this world that much, despite achieving everything here, including power so immense that I could even challenge her. She warned me that if I returned to Earth, I would have to abandon every single thing I earned as a hero. I told her to stop making excuses, because I knew she wanted me gone from this world just as badly as I did. She admitted it, saying this world no longer needed a monster like me. Then she asked if I really wouldn't regret it. I told her I just wanted to go back to my old world. I was completely done with this place that forced me to live through a literal nightmare. With that, the goddess granted my wish. A blinding golden light enveloped me from all sides. She informed me that my original body on Earth had died a long time ago, so she was going to transfer my soul into a completely new body. I asked her whose body it would be. She said she couldn't reveal everything. When I opened my eyes, it was the year 2025, and I was inside a new body. I had taken over the body of an ordinary civilian named Chonok. I got out of bed and took a sigh of relief, because I finally didn't have to face those traitors who wanted to kill me anymore. Just then, my eyes caught a mirror in the room. I walked up to it and started checking out my new face. At that exact moment, it hit me for real. I was finally back on Earth. I looked around the room, and there was clean water kept for me. Unlike that other world where you had to chop wood like a lunatic just to light a fire, everything here was so damn easy. Then, my eyes fell on a box of chicken sitting on the table. Without wasting a single second, I picked it up, and the moment I took the first bite, I completely lost it. Tears of joy literally started flowing down my face, because after years of pure hell, I was finally eating real food again. I was so lost in the joy of being back that I completely failed to notice the glowing red light visible right in the middle of the street. I realized that time had moved forward at the exact same pace on Earth as it did in that other world where I was sent. But that didn't really bother me. No matter how tough Earth got, I was absolutely sure it could never be worse than that hellish world I had just returned from. I went into the bathroom and started enjoying a proper shower after ages. It was obvious that I had zero clue about how much things had changed in this world, but I was confident that a good life was finally waiting for me. Just then, a ghost-like face appeared right outside my window. A cold shiver ran straight down my spine. How could something like this exist on Earth? Right after, an emergency broadcast echoed from behind, informing all residents that a corrosion rift had opened inside the apartment complex, ordering everyone to head to the underground shelter immediately. Bro, I didn't even know what a corrosion rift even was. Suddenly, several humanoid monsters showed up, the exact same kind of monsters I had faced in the other world. The next second, the window glass shattered, and they rushed straight at me. I turned around instantly and started running. This Earth was not the one I remembered at all. First, I needed to figure out what the hell happened here. I slithered along the edge outside the window, barely dodging the horde of monsters. Once they passed by, I climbed back inside and jumped down. Deciding to listen to the broadcast, I headed toward the underground shelter. Right then, I saw a little kid ahead of me. I grabbed him and started running together, but he said he was going to kill those monsters and asked if I was coming with him. For a second, I couldn't even process what he was yapping about. Are kids nowadays really this reckless? Through that same kid, I found out that Earth had been like this for the past 13 years. A corrosion rift is the exact spot where monsters spawn, and nobody knows how they form or when the next one will open. Hearing him talk put a heavy weight on my chest. I fought for 20 long years just to return to Earth, only to come back and see that Earth itself had become a new hell. I asked him who the most powerful hunter was right now. Without a second thought, he dropped a name: Lee Soon. She was a member of the Na6 Guild, ranked among Earth's top 10 guilds, and she wielded a great sword. This world had no shortage of powerful hunters, yet regular people were risking their own lives to fight monsters. It all still felt so unreal. Suddenly, I covered the kid's mouth with my hand and gestured for him to keep quiet. Monsters were heading our way. I focused my senses and counted there were 5 monsters right ahead. But I already knew a 6th monster was hiding somewhere out of sight. This new body of mine felt pretty strong, so handling just 5 monsters wasn't going to be tough for me. The real problem was keeping this kid safe. Leaving him behind to run wasn't an option either. As I was thinking this through, I suddenly felt a familiar magic in the air. In that instant, it all clicked. This world was running on the exact same system as that other world. The next second, one of the monsters standing in front of us was suddenly engulfed in raging flames. That was my attack. I had already exhausted all the magic I accumulated over the past 80 years, but as long as magic existed in the atmosphere, I could gather it again. This meant the black paradox flame on my soul was still with me. Its firepower wasn't what it used to be, but it was more than enough to wipe out these few monsters. Seeing this, the kid's eyes completely filled with respect for me. He said he absolutely didn't expect me to have a unique skill. Saying that, he rushed toward the remaining monsters to finish them off. I stood there completely speechless for a moment. Our main target wasn't even dead yet, so what kind of confidence was this lil bro cooking with to attack them? Just as I thought, all the monsters targeted him instantly. He started trembling right there out of pure fear, but before anything could happen, I caught his hand just in time. I told him to hand me the piece of wood lying on the ground. I needed a weapon. The next moment, 3 monsters lunged at me at full speed. The second that wood touched my hand, something inside me shifted. I swung it so fast that a loud, explosive sound ripped through the air, and all 3 monsters were sliced clean in half at the waist, dropping dead on the spot. Seeing this, the kid was utterly stunned. At that exact moment, he decided I must be some kind of hidden hunter. The peaceful life I had risked everything to get was turning into a battlefield right before my eyes again. With a deep sadness on my face, I took the kid and made it inside the underground shelter. The moment his mother saw him, she ran over, hugged him tightly, and kept thanking me repeatedly for saving her son's life. Looking at her clothes, it was obvious she was filthy rich. Then it clicked, so this kid was just a spoiled young master from a wealthy family, which explains why he was doing such foolish things a moment ago. Suddenly, the entire building started shaking violently. Within a few seconds, a monster smashed through the main door and forced its way inside. But I didn't budge from my spot. The boy turned to me and screamed at the top of his lungs to run, because even I wouldn't be able to beat this monster. Still, I didn't move. I thought I had returned to the same Earth I used to know, but it was crystal clear now that this world wasn't much different from the one I left behind. I looked at him and asked, "If your family has this much money, what's the need to become a hunter? Wouldn't it be better to just hide somewhere safe and live a comfortable life?" He revealed that his father had been killed by a monster. That day, his entire family was hidden in a shelter just like this one. That was the day he realized no place on Earth was truly safe anymore. Right then, he promised himself that he would become a hunter, the strongest hunter who would clear every single corrosion rift and save this world. He said, "You might think my words are foolish, but..." Before he could even finish his sentence, I stopped him. I told him that one day he really would become a great hunter, but he wouldn't be the one saving this world. His mother frantically grabbed him, begging him to run. Just then, another loud explosion echoed behind us. He turned around to look, and the very monster everyone was terrified of was lying dead on the ground, taken out by a single hand strike. I told him, "Saving this world isn't your job, it's mine." I already had plenty of experience in battles like this. After everything quieted down and I made that promise to the boy about saving the world, I went straight back to my apartment. Once there, I started playing video games and binging on junk food. I was talking with full confidence earlier about saving the world, but the moment I got good food and games, that confidence slowly started to vanish. To be honest, I didn't really have much motivation left inside me. Besides, I figured there are already so many hunters in the world doing this exact job day and night. I picked up my phone to order more junk food, but then I remembered the real crisis. The termination pay I had was completely gone. I found out that the original owner of this body used to work at a logistics company, but due to a corrosion rift, the company shut down and he lost his job. That's when I realized I was completely broke, and I absolutely had to find a job no matter what. I had already looked for work in several places before, but because of the corrosion rifts, companies were shutting down constantly, making it almost impossible to find a normal job. I was lying on my bed wondering what to do next, when suddenly a notification popped up on my phone. Hunter recruitment. I figured that after everything I've already been through, I basically had all the experience needed for this gig. So, I flexed my way straight to the Hunter Association. The place was absolutely packed with people who had the exact same idea. Right then, I overheard 2 guys yapping. They were saying the selection process nowadays is just for show, because at the end of the day, all that matters is flexing a unique skill. Everything was going smoothly until a legendary hunter showed up, and the entire hall completely lost its mind. Every single candidate started aura farming the moment they saw her, mostly because everyone thought she was out dealing with a corrosion rift and wouldn't make it today. They all assumed the Janabi squad had personally sent her to scout for new talent. Now, everyone had just one question on their mind. Who exactly was she here for? After a bit, word got out that she was here to see a candidate named Hanso, an academy graduate who possessed the awakened ability of electrokinesis. Looking through her file, the legendary hunter jokingly asked, "So, can you charge up phone batteries with that power too?" Her assistant immediately chimed in, saying she wasn't some human power generator, she was a hunter. She also mentioned that from what she's heard, Hanso is genuinely talented and could be a massive asset in the future. That's when the other assistant added that the real battles inside a corrosion rift are completely different from cozy academy training. A lot of top academy students completely fumble their talent in a real fight. The hunter praised her point and rewarded her with a piece of candy. She knew better than anyone that practice and a real battlefield are worlds apart. Academy kids had always trained in a safe environment, so adapting to a real, brutal battlefield takes them a hot minute. A little while later, the host stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone to the arena. He announced that the first match was about to kick off, openly hoping Hanso would put on a show good enough to catch the hunter's eye. But then, he pointed out something unusual about the first candidate. The guy wasn't an academy student at all. He was just a regular civilian. The host himself was wondering how a mere civilian even had the absolute nerve to step onto this stage. Then, he called out my name and introduced me to the entire roaring crowd. My opponent stepped up and squared off against me. The host explained the rules. No personal weapons allowed except the official ones provided by the association, and lethal or fatal injuries were strictly banned. For me, the ultimate goal was simply saving the world. But honestly, I also wanted to eat good food and live life on my own terms. In my eyes, securing a solid result in this tournament was the first step toward that dream. The moment everything was set, the referee signaled the start of the match. My opponent instantly set his spear ablaze and started clowning me right off the bat. He called me trash and mocked me, saying I didn't even know how to gather mana. I hadn't even made a move yet, and he was already telling me I should just take the L gracefully and surrender. He charged straight at me, hyping himself up as the undefeated spearmaster of the Hunter Academy. But mid-sprint, I completely vanished from his sight. Before his brain could even process what happened, I was standing right next to him. I planted a clean punch straight into his gut, then used that exact momentum to follow up with a brutal uppercut. He doubled over in pure agony, dropping straight to his knees as a few of his teeth flew out onto the floor. Honestly, I was a little surprised he went down that easily, considering I was holding back my strength the entire time. I really didn't want to seriously break the guy. I figured he must just be a total beginner. I refused to believe that modern hunters could actually be this weak. Sitting up in the stands, the legendary hunter witnessed the whole thing and was left completely stunned. She instantly pulled out her tablet and started running a background check on me. According to the data she pulled, I was listed as nothing more than a basic logistics worker. Right then, one of her assistants murmured that my win was probably just pure luck. The hunter responded by stuffing her trash candy into the assistant's mouth, her classic way of telling someone to shut up. She openly stated she was absolutely certain I was hiding my true power on purpose, noting that I hadn't even bothered to gather a single drop of mana during the fight. Stepping back into the arena, I decided it was time to end this match right here. I slowly walked toward my opponent. Watching me approach, he looked completely terrified, like the ground had just slipped right out from under his feet. I told him to stay calm, and assured him I wasn't going to kill him. But even with me keeping a light hand, a single punch was all it took to knock him completely unconscious. Seeing this unfold, every single official in the room was left speechless. Meanwhile, the legendary hunter realized that the other guilds were definitely going to start keeping tabs on me now, and would try to recruit me into their ranks very soon. But she decided that before anyone else could move, she needed to see my true strength with her own eyes. She stood up from her seat, and when her team asked where she was going, she simply told them she had a meeting with the association president. The tournament kept rolling forward, and no matter who stepped up to face me, I easily swept them all. But the further I advanced, the more disappointing it got. These new hunters were way weaker than I ever expected. I didn't even need to pull out a weapon for a single match. I just kept dropping everyone with my bare fists. It made me wonder what on earth they were even teaching them at the Hunter Academy, because up until now, I hadn't run into a single fighter I could actually call competent. Finally, I made it all the way to the final round, where I was set to face Hanso. Everyone in the arena was entirely convinced that she would be the one to finally stop my winning streak. The moment Hanso stepped onto the stage, I looked at her and remarked that out of all the candidates who had competed so far, she had gathered the most mana by a mile, but she completely brushed my comment aside. She claimed I had only made it this far based on pure luck, and that my luck was officially running out today. She drew her sword and said she already figured out I didn't possess any unique skill. Even so, she made it clear she wasn't going to show me an ounce of mercy. I just thanked her. As far as my actual skill went, I had zero intention of using it against her anyway. She took a deep breath, gathered her mana, and locked in, preparing to strike with everything she had. The next split second, she blitzed toward me with lightning speed. But right as her attack was about to land, I leaped straight into the air and dodged the strike with absolute ease. She was visibly stunned by this. She couldn't comprehend how someone could completely evade a lightning-fast attack just by jumping out of the way. To be completely fair, I was actually a little impressed by her technique. She had run an electric current through both her blade and the hilt, causing them both to magnetize. That little trick massively boosted her sword draw speed. I looked down at her and noted that out of all the opponents I'd faced so far, she was easily the best. However, she had made one massive, fatal mistake. Her entire focus was purely on stacking speed. In her rush to make the attack even faster, she had accidentally created a visible magnetic rail right through the air. No matter how fast or powerful an attack is, if the trajectory is laid out that clearly, no one is just going to stand there and take it. But she flat out refused to listen to me. She snapped back that it was all just a fluke and told me not to get cocky. I effortlessly dodged her next attack too and asked if she was really trying to hit me with something even slower than the move I had already cleared. Hearing that completely set her off. She threw caution to the wind, unleashed her maximum output, and executed a technique so intense that the ground beneath her feet literally shattered. Right then, I realized she was pushing past her absolute limits. If she kept fighting like this, she was going to seriously tear her own body apart. So, I decided to wrap this fight up immediately. I jokingly told her that if my next hit hurts too bad, she should just raise her left hand. Before she could even utter a word, I was already right in front of her. I planted a straight punch directly into her stomach, sending a massive shockwave rippling through her entire body. Before she could even attempt to recover her balance, I connected with a second punch, sending her flying through the air until she crashed hard in the distance. The entire arena went dead silent. Absolutely nobody had anticipated that the Academy's top student would get dropped this fast. Would lose that easily. I started walking down the stage, but right then, my eyes caught her left hand. No shot. She actually had her left hand raised. I instantly remembered my own joke and stood there stunned for a second, fully surprised she actually listened to me. As I was stepping off the stage, the referee suddenly received an urgent notification. He immediately halted the match and announced a major schedule change. Then, he turned to me and told me to take a quick breather. I was honestly a bit confused since the match was already over, but the next piece of info he dropped completely shocked the entire arena. My next matchup was set against an active, pro hunter. The moment that hunter's name flashed across the big screen, the whole crowd absolutely lost it, screaming at the top of their lungs. I thought to myself, if they're throwing her at me, she must be an absolute powerhouse. A few moments later, she stepped onto the stage wielding a massive greatsword. She didn't beat around the bush at all. She straight up told me that the only way to truly gauge my real strength was to fight me herself. She introduced herself, named her guild, and requested a proper match. At the same time, she made it clear that I could totally pass on this match if I wanted to, given how incredibly sudden this all was. Seeing her up close, it instantly clicked why she's ranked among the top 10 hunters in the entire world. Just her stance alone and her deadpan, calm expression screamed how insanely experienced she was. I knew my new, unconditioned body might struggle against someone of her caliber, but I honestly didn't care. Without wasting a single second, I accepted her challenge. I looked her in the eye and said we could get it popping right now. Hearing my response, even the referee was stunned. I told him my stamina hadn't even taken a hit yet, so I was fully locked in. Besides, if I wanted to pull the best possible results out of this tournament, clashing with her was my absolute best bet. I picked up my spear and thought, let's see how much my stock shoots up after this fight. The second our clash began, the entire audience went dead silent. Even the referee was dripping in sweat, completely throwing a blank on how to even commentate a fight this fast. I managed to parry another one of her heavy attacks, but this time, the effortless look on my face was entirely gone. It was crystal clear now. This woman was a literal monster. She was so strong that the gap between us was barely there. The pressure from her relentless onslaught kept building. To break free, I spun my spear right in my palm and pushed back with everything I had, forcing her attack away. But compared to the start of the match, my speed had noticeably dropped, and for the first time, visible fatigue started showing on my face. She walked toward me, completely unfazed, and said, "Not bad. Honestly, I figured you'd last maybe 5 minutes max, but you've been cooking for 30. With that, her speed suddenly spiked again, and she blitzed right back at me. She mentioned that since I was clearly running on fumes, she'd make the rest of the fight easy for me. I gripped my spear even tighter. I was completely out of stored magic, and the ambient mana in the air was practically non-existent. I really didn't want to resort to using that move, but at this point, I had no other choice. The exact millisecond I activated it, she immediately sensed that something shifted. Yet, Without pausing for a single beat, she brought her weapon down toward me with absolute, crushing force. I barely managed to dodge the attack and instantly leaped backward. Pure shock spread across her face. She knew damn well that the attack packed enough power that dodging it should have been statistically impossible for me. Looking at me with deep suspicion, she demanded, "What exactly are you hiding? What is up with your body?" "Paradox Flame," I replied. "It's my signature power, the one ability I relied on the most in my past life." She noticed there wasn't a single scratch or tear on my clothes, and that's when the realization hit her. These black flames don't burn physical matter. They burn abstract concepts as fuel. However, my current output was so limited that I could only burn away things like fatigue. I rushed toward her, and she instantly felt my speed ramping back up. But in the next split second, she also realized I was fully recovering in record time. We collided head-on. My mana concentration kept fluctuating wildly, making her even more suspicious. Just like a normal fire gives off heat as it burns, my Paradox Flame releases mana. I use mana to ignite the Paradox Flame, and then the Paradox Flame burns my fatigue to generate even more mana. It was a literal infinite loop. In other words, this was my ultimate cheat code. She unleashed a massively powerful attack that sent debris flying in every direction, completely blanketing the battlefield in thick smoke. But that didn't faze me at all. I stood right in the middle of the haze, completely unscathed. I looked through the smoke and told her, "I can still go." At this point, the match had devolved into a pure war of attrition. I then looked at her and asked, "Do you dig guys who just refuse to take the L?" Without hesitating for even a second, she shot back, "I absolutely despise people like that, but even my power had its limits." The moment the Paradox Flame completely burned through its available fuel, it vanished on its own. She glanced at the timer, 4 hours and 17 minutes. We had been going at it non-stop for that long. She stared at me, as if asking if I still wanted to keep pushing. I simply said, "Nah." With that, the announcer officially declared her the winner. She then pulled out a lollipop, leaving the onlookers completely baffled. She handed me the candy along with her business card. Glancing at the card, I realized she was a Team 3 partner hunter from Janabe LLC. She simply said, "Let's talk later. Give me a call." Once the match wrapped up, the announcer took center stage and officially declared the hunter selection exam closed. The scene shifted. I was chewing on the lollipop she gave me, staring blankly at the smartphone in my hand. Back in my day, we used handwritten documents to prove our identity. But this single device could verify your identity, run a secondhand equipment trading app, and handle all your calls and texts. Right then, a heavily built man walked up to me. He remarked that I looked even better in person than on camera, then handed me a business card. It read Grand Purity, LLC, and his name was Yusan Heian. He didn't waste any time and got straight to the point. He wanted me to join his team. He argued that if I gained experience under him, I'd definitely go places. I read his face closely, but he didn't seem like he was capping. At the exact same time, I remembered the hunter's words about calling her after I rested up. So, I pocketed his card and told him I needed some time to think it over because I had somewhere else to be. Hearing this, he let out a laugh and said, "Did you seriously think I was going to force an answer out of you right this second?" For a moment, I thought he made a fair point. He told me to take my time and think about it, expressing full confidence that I'd make the right call. With that, he walked away, leaving me standing there. I honestly didn't expect him to be that straightforward. But the moment he left, I made up my mind. Not only was I not joining Grand Purity, I didn't even want to give them another thought. About 10 minutes later, I dialed Lee Soon and asked where she was at. She sent me an address, a small shop located on the second floor of the Hunter Association, and told me to head straight up. The moment the clerk spotted me, a smile spread across their face. Hearing me walk in, Lee Soon turned toward me and casually waved me over. She probably didn't expect me to show up this fast. She asked what was up, so I told her that a pretty big shot had just tried to recruit me into his guild. She immediately chimed in, saying it must have been Yan Haiyan from Grand Purity. She added that since she had already decided to recruit me herself, no other guild would even have the nerve to approach me. I let out a soft chuckle and remarked that it sounded like her own guild was low-key, terrified of her. But the one thing I absolutely did not see coming was that she had zero interest in actually recruiting me into her guild. Instead, she looked at me and asked, "How do you feel about bypassing the guilds entirely and just working freelance?" She said that Yan Haiyan had probably offered me a junior position at best. The moment I heard that, I slammed my hand on the table. A junior position? Then what exactly is a partner hunter? That's when she broke down the whole structure for me. Guild hunters are typically split into 3 tiers: junior, senior, and partner. Juniors and seniors grind inside a partner hunters team and draw a fixed salary. On the flip side, partner hunters don't take a salary at all. They bag a direct cut of the company's net profits, exactly like a business owner. The whole setup sounded exactly like a corporate law firm. She confirmed it was totally intentional. The people who built the hunter guilds modeled them strictly after law firms. In her book, me starting as a junior and slowly grinding my way up to partner made absolutely zero sense. Her logic clicked with me. If I could build a massive reputation and drop results so crazy that everyone was forced to take notice, the top guilds would come hunting for me on their own. Hearing this, she looked pretty pleased, but there was still one thing I couldn't wrap my head around. Why did she keep giving me candy? I pointed out that I had zero connections and zero resources, meaning getting my hands on high-tier commissions entirely on my own was basically impossible. She told me not to stress about it, claiming she was helping me out entirely for free. Still, I wasn't buying it. She unzipped her file bag and said that one day, when my name is huge and every guild is desperate to recruit me, all she wants is for me to remember that there was a woman who had my back when I was nothing. She told me I could just consider it a favor. With that, she slid the file bag across the table toward me and asked if I wanted to take a look. I opened the bag. Inside was a 2-year-old commission from the Incheon City Hall. There had been a previous attempt to clear a corrosion rift on Jiadong Island, but the raid completely fumbled, turning the entire place into a full-blown corrosion zone. I figured the mission would be to clear out the entire zone, but the actual request was something else entirely. The brief stated we were to patrol Jiadong Island, and the moment any new corrosion rift formed, we had to locate and eliminate it immediately. The mission was set to kick off in a month. She mentioned I'd get $5 million up front, and if the mission succeeded, I'd bag an extra $15 million as a bonus. I dropped the file back onto the table. The gig was so insanely dangerous that I could literally lose my life, and compared to the risk, the bag wasn't nearly heavy enough. Hearing this, her eyes lit up. She said if I thought that was low, the solution was simple. Get stronger, get famous, and the money will print itself, no matter how loaded your pockets already are. But right now, she just needed a straight yes or no. I quietly replied that if that's how it is, I'm taking the mission. Half an hour later, Lee Soon was on the phone passing my data to someone. She explained that my background was just a regular civilian, that I had zero proper weapon training, and that I had run through the mandatory tournament completely unarmed. On the other end, the guy mentioned my evaluation came back as completely average. Hearing this, Lee Soon burst out laughing, saying you can't judge my actual strength just by looking at a basic evaluation sheet, considering I had just gone toe-to-toe with her for 4 straight hours. The guy on the other end wasn't buying it at all, asking if she had just gone easy on me the entire fight. Lee Soon let out a soft laugh and reminded him she had over 10 years of experience in this field and had made it back alive from places people literally call hell. Yet she still had to fight me head-on for 4 hours. At that exact moment, a thought crossed her mind. Even if she got another shot at life, she'd probably never run into someone like me again. The guy on the other line was still sweating it. He pointed out that this mission was specifically designed for veteran hunters, asking if someone with my skill set could actually keep pace with the vets. Lee Soon told him not to worry, mentioning she had already lined up an experienced hunter to babysit me throughout the entire mission. He then asked, "What if he eventually scales up to your level?" Without a single shred of hesitation, Lee Soon replied, "It might sound wild, but if he ever reaches my level, even the boss won't be able to clear him." A month before the mission was set to start, a parcel arrived at my apartment. Inside was a spear and an elixir. The elixir was a condensed mana potion used for emergencies, which massively sped up the long process of drawing mana from the air and storing it in the body. But my method was completely different. I didn't store mana in my body. I drew it straight from the atmosphere and burned it instantly. This meant I never had to deal with storage limits, and every single time mana coursed through my channels, they grew even stronger. The only drawback was that until my channels were fully developed, the amount of mana I could use in a single burst was incredibly low. Still, since time was ticking, I used a little bit of the elixir, confident that a month of training would massively upgrade this new body. Flash forward to the present, and all the hunters were lined up to get their identities verified. After verification, it turned out I was assigned to Squad 8. I went over to stand with the rest of the members, and right then, Hanso walked up to me. The long scar on her shoulder was clearly visible. She said we should work together on this mission because I was stronger than her and she wanted to learn a few things from me. I jokingly replied, "You're flexing so hard I feel like my shoulder's gonna pop out." But as usual, the joke went completely over her head, and she seriously asked if my shoulder actually dislocates like that. Looking at her, I instantly flashed back to our old match when she took my words completely literally. A little later, an official kicked off the mission briefing. Seeing the new recruits, he started by breaking down the basics. Corrosion rifts are categorized into Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and unclassified, with Class 1 being the absolute most dangerous. The very first rift to open in an area is dubbed the Alpha Rift. This island's Alpha Rift was located in the Northern Church and was currently deemed unclassified. Everyone was strictly warned that the corrosion gets exponentially stronger over time, so absolutely nobody was to approach the Alpha Rift. Our sole job was to patrol the perimeter, hunt down any newly forming rifts, and squash them on sight. Hearing this, one of the squad members was completely pressed that he was being sent on an elimination mission with a bunch of rookies. Just like that, the entire squad started looking down on me as nothing but a green new hunter. Before we deployed, we were told that the command room set up off the coast was fully operational and would send backup if things went sideways. With that, we were sent out on the mission. The second we touched down on the island, the veteran hunters started drawing up a plan. But I cut right in, stating we should set up our base at the Hugsa Temple, pointing out its exact location on the map. The vets absolutely hated a rookie, giving them advice. They snapped back, asking why the temple of all places, so I explained that the peak gives a crystal clear view of the entire target area, and the old temple structure is still in solid shape, giving us a perfect place to camp. But the moment the words left my mouth, they completely flipped out. They started yelling that there were plenty of other places to stay, and one of them demanded to know what we'd do if we got completely surrounded after blindly climbing a mountain. I reminded them that we weren't heading into a fight against thousands of enemies, so getting surrounded wasn't an actual issue. But no matter how much I tried to break it down for them, they flat out stated they weren't going to take orders from an inexperienced kid like me. That's when it hit me. Idiots don't just exist in the other world. Earth has plenty of them too. Since they had zero interest in working with me, I told them we should just split up. I headed off toward the temple, and Hanso trailed right behind me. Surprisingly, that yellow-haired guy from earlier tags along with us too. I had no clue why he even came. I called out to him, asking, "Yo, ninja, why are you following us?" He acted a bit stuck up, claiming he was only there to keep an eye on us rookies. I just thanked him. Honestly, I was a little surprised. Turns out this squad actually had at least one decent guy in it. Suddenly, I killed my stride and signaled the other two to halt immediately. I told them to cut the noise and keep it down, whispering, "Kim," to tag along with me and scout ahead in stealth. The path right in front of us was absolutely crawling with monsters. By my count, there were at least 50 of them. I muttered that we needed to find an alternate route, then turned to Kim Ninja and asked what his unique skill was. Hearing my question, the guy looked completely flabbergasted, unable to believe I was actually planning to throw hands with a pack of 50 monsters. I looked at him and asked, "Bro, isn't hunting monsters literally the entire point of being a hunter?" He explained that his skill was fire-based. When I asked which specific ability he relied on the most, he replied, "Fireball." I told him that was literally all we needed. Then, I instructed him to wait for my signal before launching his attack. He immediately started protesting, calling the plan absolute foolishness. We were just 3 people up against 50 monsters. In his mind, the right move was to radio the other hunters for backup. I flat out told him that by then, it would be way too late. We had come straight from the temple side, while the rest of the hunters were still out searching near the coast. If we just sat around waiting and the monsters scattered, they'd become a massive headache for the other teams. Deep down, Kim Ninja knew I was speaking straight facts. Plus, the other hunters probably wouldn't rush to save our skin anyway, given the massive argument we had just this morning. I told him we only had one real option left. We had to wipe out these monsters ourselves. The odds were heavily stacked against us, but I noted that a surprise attack was our best play. Since time was ticking, I quickly drew up the entire strategy right there in the sand. Kim Ninja would drop a fireball dead center first, and I'd hold down both flanks. Looking at my plan, Kim Ninja was completely stunned. He couldn't believe I had already mapped out every single possible scenario. The moment I finished explaining the play, he didn't waste a second and unleashed a fireball right into the middle of the pack. A massive explosion rocked the area, catching the entire center crowd of monsters in the blast. After landing the hit, he stepped back and noted that the next fireball would take a hot minute to charge up. By then, I had already charged forward, constantly parrying and holding back the remaining monsters. I yelled back at him to drop the next fireball the exact second it was ready. On any mission, I always prioritize absolute efficiency, which is why everyone needed a distinct role. My job was to serve as a human wall, keeping the monsters pinned down until Kim Ninja could cook up his next fireball. I already knew I couldn't body every single monster alone, so splitting the workload was the most optimal play. Any stray monster that managed to slip past my line of attack was immediately deleted from behind by Hanso. A moment later, Kim Ninja shouted that his next fireball was fully locked and loaded. I instantly cleared his line of sight so he could launch the second strike without any interference. The next explosion went off, and within moments, the entire area was completely cleared. I was just about to hype both of them up for a job well done when Kim Ninja suddenly whipped out his gun and aimed it straight at my back. For a split second, I genuinely thought the guy was about to clip me. But the very next second, he smirked and said, "Slide to the side real quick, bro. You're blocking my line of fire." I stood there completely silent for a moment. He then fired 2 rounds straight into the monster carcasses. Those bullets were packed with microchips. He explained that once the mission is officially wrapped up and the area is declared safe, his contracted scrap recovery company would pull up. These guys specialize in harvesting materials from monster remains. Once the microchips are tagged, the company hauls the bodies away, sells off any high-value loot, tallies up the worth, and splits the profit. First, they take their cut according to the contract, and the rest of the bag is sent straight to the deceased hunter's family. I asked him if these recovery companies could actually be trusted, and he replied that if you pick a reputable firm and lock in a contract beforehand, absolutely. While the two of us were talking, a rogue monster had been hiding behind a tree the entire time, tracking our movements. Without warning, it lunged straight at us. The sheer impact of its jump sent rocks flying everywhere. I instantly grabbed Kim Ninja and yanked him back. If I had been even a second late, we both would have been severely cooked. Once we reached a safe distance, I set him down and turned to face the beast myself. Kim Ninja was losing his mind. We had just wiped out an entire monster horde, and now this new threat was staring us down. The monster let out a twisted, eerie laugh. My expression grew dead serious. It clicked instantly. This thing was the leader of the pack we had just demolished. I quietly cursed under my breath. Its creepy laughter echoed continuously, and the sheer density of the magic bleeding off it was palpable. This was nothing like the weak, small fry from earlier. I glanced back at the two behind me and stated, "Nobody interferes. I'm handling this solo." They both froze. They probably thought we should team up to take this beast down, but I laid it down straight. "I'm only going to say this once. Step back and don't make me repeat myself, unless you want to go home in a body bag." Hearing my tone, they both shut up instantly. I gripped my spear, stepped up, and loudly challenged the monster to bring it on. The next split second, the clash was on. Hanso wanted to rush in and back me up, but Kim Ninja held her back, pointing out that if she jumped in right now, she'd only get in my way. Throughout the entire skirmish, the leader couldn't land a single clean hit on me. Hanso noticed something else too. If she had been in my shoes, dodging that absolute rain of attacks would have been statistically impossible. Wherever my spear cut through the air, it left trails of black flames mimicking my shadow. The more black flames stacked onto the monster, the more its movements noticeably slowed down. To an outside observer, it looked like I was locked in a desperate, hard-fought struggle. But the reality was, I was just playing with my food. Hanso was completely awestruck, left wondering if I was actually just a rookie. Right then, the leader lunged at me again. In a flash, I ducked low, slid backward along the ground, and tossed my spear straight up into the air as I retreated. Seeing this, Hanso's eyes went wide. She couldn't comprehend why on earth I would just throw my weapon away mid-combat. The spear slowly began its descent while the leader kept barreling straight toward me. The next instant, it was right in my face. But I didn't panic for a single second, staring back into its eyes completely unfazed. Suddenly, a clean crunch echoed, and its head slowly slid off its shoulders right in front of me. The spear I had tossed into the air was my true finishing move all along. The weapon had driven itself clean through the beast's neck. Even decapitated, its body kept twitching. I had to give it credit. Its will to survive was pretty crazy. But the outcome of this fight was decided before it even started. I had zero intention of giving it a single opening to counterattack. So right in front of Hanso and Kim Ninja, I ripped the spear out and repeatedly drove it into its skull until it stopped moving entirely. Seeing this, Kim Ninja completely lost it. Just a few seconds ago, he was certain I was about to take the L, but in the blink of an eye, the boss monster was fully dead. I turned to him and asked if running into monsters of this caliber was normal around here. The question left Kim Ninja deep in thought. He noted that if a single monster possessed this much raw power, even if it wasn't the actual corrosion core, this entire sector had to be at least a level 3 zone. Corrosion zones are split into 4 distinct tiers, and the mission brief explicitly stated that Jiadong Island's Alpha Corrosion Unit was currently unrated. If this data was accurate, it meant the Alpha unit here had already evolved to level 3. Hanso was still in denial, refusing to believe it. But I told her to look at the facts. If the area hadn't already evolved, high-tier monsters like this wouldn't be spawning out in the open. Hearing my logic, Kim Ninja's face completely dropped. Scaling straight from unrated to level 3 was a massive leap. If the sector had truly become this dangerous, very few hunters deployed here were going to make it back alive. Kim Ninja argued that we needed to track down the other hunters first to give them a heads up, but I shot that idea down immediately. I couldn't single-handedly scout the entire island to save every stray hunter. Even I had my limits. If a task was impossible, it was impossible. I flat out stated that our mission isn't to play rescue squad. Our job is strictly to hunt down newly formed corrosion rifts and squash them on sight. And in missions like this, there's never a guarantee that everyone makes it back alive. That's when Hanso asked, "If you were the one trapped in a corner like that, how would you feel? Wouldn't you want someone to come slide for you and save your skin?" I looked at her, dead serious, and replied, "Do you honestly think saving people means moving with the same mindset as the ones who are about to die?" I told her it wasn't that I lacked empathy, but I care about results. Some casualties are strictly unavoidable. When you're staring down that kind of absolute certainty, you just have to accept it at the end of the day. The most fatal mistake you can make in a situation like this is hesitating. Because people who hesitate on these kinds of missions don't survive out here for very long, far. That night, we managed to secure an abandoned private house to camp out in. There wasn't a single trace indicating that a corrosion monster had ever set foot in the place. After clearing the entire perimeter, Kim Ninja confirmed the spot was completely safe, though the inside was pitch black. He suggested turning on the lights so the other hunters could track our location, but I shut that down immediately. I told him that flipping the switch wouldn't just alert our allies, it would expose our coordinates to the monsters too. If another beast like that pack leader pulled up, things would go sideways real quick. Instead, I used my terminal to ping a warning text to all the other squads. This is Squad 8. Judging by the anomalies we just clashed with, the Alpha Corrosion unit has already scaled up to level 3. Do not flip on any lights unless you want high-risk monsters tracking your exact location. I knew that once a rift's core gets completely deleted, all the connected corrosion creatures automatically vanish, and the moment their energy source drops to 0, the entire corrosion zone gradually fades away. With that in mind, I was fully confident I'd squash that rift myself when the perfect opening showed up. By the time the night grew deep, Hanso and Kim Ninja were already fast asleep. I set down an alarm device right next to them that would blast a warning the second a monster breached the perimeter, and then I silently headed out into the forest completely solo. The Alpha Rift's coordinates were already marked during the brief, so everything should have gone exactly according to the playbook. Suddenly, I caught a faint movement right ahead. I cut my stride and looked up, only for that same creepy, twisted laughter to echo through the trees. I muttered to myself, "Yeah, I already knew this wasn't just going to be a walk in the park." At first, I thought the previous monster had somehow respawned, but looking closer, it was an entirely different creature with a face I had never seen before. Meanwhile, back in the Hunter Association's command room, absolute chaos was breaking out. Communications with multiple hunters from Team 5 had completely dropped, and everyone was stressing that they had already been wiped out. Reports kept flooding in, stating that the monsters were now executing highly coordinated ambushes. To make matters worse, a hunter from Team 3 had just been confirmed KIA. Seeing the situation completely fall apart, the command room declared a state of emergency and demanded immediate high-tier reinforcements from the superiors. At the same time, they activated the emergency contact network, firing off an urgent distress call to every single hunter in the vicinity to secure cooperation. Right in the middle of the panic, word reached them that a lone hunter was making a direct, fast-paced dash straight toward the Alpha Corrosion Rift. Hearing this, the team leader completely lost his composure and instantly ordered his squad to stop that hunter at all costs. A moment later, they realized that Rogue Hunter was actually me, representing Squad 8. He immediately patched through to my terminal to verify if I was even still breathing. It finally clicked for him that throughout this entire operation, I was probably the only one who truly understood the actual status of the rift, considering an abrupt level spike like this was insanely rare. The second the audio connected, I straight up blasted the officials sitting in the control room, calling them out for entirely fumbling the rift's initial evaluation. I was fiercely chewing them out, but mid-fight, a sudden realization hit me. Relying purely on the Paradox Flame wasn't going to cut it against this beast. The only optimal play was to weaken it with the Black Flames first and then finish the job with a clean spear thrust. But clashing with that mid-level boss earlier had already drained a massive chunk of my mana, meaning my flames weren't stacking nearly as heavy as before. Bailing off the island wasn't an option, so I needed a high-density sector where I could harvest way more mana. A few moments later, I located the Alpha Rift and, without a single shred of hesitation, dove straight into the portal. As I breached the gateway, I taunted the beast behind me. "Slide through if you've got the nerve. I need to confirm something real quick. At that exact millisecond, my GPS signal completely vanished from the command screen, and everyone in the room realized I had officially entered the rift. The interior of the rift was massive, looking way cleaner and grander than I anticipated. I thought to myself, if an unclassified rift is this gigantic, Class 1 and Class 2 zones must be absolutely wild. Right then, the main boss monster spawned right in front of me. I knew it was time to wrap this whole fight up right here. The ultimate drawback of the Paradox Flame was that it completely incinerated every single living entity in its vicinity besides me, whether they were friend or foe. There were times the flames would completely defy my control. But since I was riding solo this time, I could unleash my maximum output without worrying about collateral damage. I unleashed a colossal wave of black flames straight at the boss, while continuously drawing mana from the atmosphere to structurally reinforce my internal channels. The boss let out a deafening, piercing shriek, and the very next second, hordes of monsters started swarming in from every single direction. That screech was a clear distress signal to summon backup. I just laughed it off and muttered, flooding the field with small fry changes, absolutely nothing. I erected a massive wall of black flames completely surrounding myself. Any stray monster that dared to breach the perimeter was instantly turned to ash. I knew that the absolute strongest entity inside a rift is the actual core itself. Suddenly, another monster launched a surprise attack from my blind spot. I cleared the strike just in time, spinning around to find an absolutely hideous creature glaring at me. The most shocking part? This thing could actually speak. It had intentionally sat out the fight, waiting until my black flames completely burned out before making its move. That's when it clicked. This hideous thing was the actual core of the rift. I quickly calculated that with my current output, I could delete it in exactly 4 continuous, high-intensity strikes. I instantly hurled my spear straight at it, but it managed to parry the weapon with its own spear. Still, the raw momentum of my throw kept driving it backward. At that exact moment, I activated Dual Orbit Spear. The very next split second, a colossal burst of energy erupted, shattering its weapon to pieces and driving the strike clean through its torso. The ultimate feature of this skill was that its blue trajectory perfectly mimicked the initial strike, repeating the exact motion 4 times in a row to execute a flawless, 2-part spear combo that was statistically impossible to evade. In a final, desperate bid to clip me, the monster lunged straight ahead, but that played right into my hands. I caught it dead center midair, executed a brutal, heavy slash, and delivered the final finishing blow, completely shattering its body into pieces. Even after taking the L, its remains didn't dissolve. Instead, a rare reward chest spawned right where it fell. Meanwhile, back in the Situation Room, the officials were still sweating bullets, fully convinced that the entire operation had fumbled. But right then, a direct transmission from inside the rift flashed across the main screen. The text read, "Alpha corrosion officially cleared." The very next second, real-time reports started flooding in, confirming the rift had completely collapsed, and the remaining monsters across the island were dropping dead one by one. The team leader stood there entirely speechless. The absolute miracle he had been praying for had just unfolded right before his eyes, yet his brain couldn't comprehend how I had just pulled off such a crazy feat. Rewinding the clock by just 2 minutes, a massive horde of monsters was relentlessly pouring out from the rift lines, and Hanso was standing on the front lines leading the defense. Her entire body was covered in deep gashes, and her grip on her blade was slipping fast from sheer exhaustion. Yet, she stood her ground, refusing to back down. Compared to the previous day, the monster density was scaling way higher. On top of that, when they woke up this morning, Yushin Suk was nowhere to be found. From behind her, Kim Ninja yelled out, "Bro, do you honestly think we're making it back alive from this?" Hanso glanced back at him, realizing he had hit his absolute limit. But the harsh reality was that she didn't have the answers either. She had zero clue if they were going to survive or how much longer she could keep cooking on the front lines. Suddenly, a terrifying monster lunged straight at Hanso. She immediately tried to lock into a defensive stance, but her legs went completely numb, refusing to move. The situation grew even more critical as 3 more monsters synchronized their charge straight toward her. Kim Ninja witnessed the entire sequence unfold, but he was completely out of gas and lacked the strength to slide in for the save. The monster's claws were inches away from her neck, forcing her to practically close her eyes and brace for the impact. 5 seconds ticked away, but the agonizing scream everyone was waiting for never came. When they finally opened their eyes, standing right in front of them, every single monster had completely vanished. The next day, I pulled up to the Jiadong Island Hunter Assembly Point. Seeing so many injured hunters lined up, my expression turned dead serious. I low-key figured the corrosion rift must have completely spiraled out of control after I dipped. But the exact millisecond the other hunters spotted me, they looked completely flabbergasted. They couldn't believe I had soloed a level 3 corrosion rift all by myself. I walked over to Squad 8, and Kim Ninja was just standing there, utterly speechless. He never expected me to actually delete that rift solo. I let out a soft smirk and claimed my body just moved on its own to save my fellow hunters. Everything had actually gone way smoother than expected, so I decided to keep riding this good guy persona for now. Right then, Park Jong-tae called out to me from behind. He introduced himself as the branch manager of the Korea Operations Company and mentioned that the mayor wanted to lock in a meeting with me. I thought to myself, there wasn't any extra reward in the contract for clearing a level 3 threat, but since the opportunity pulled up, I figured I might as well negotiate a heavier bag. Before reaching the mayor's office, a liaison officer named Lee Hyuk came to pick me up. On the way, he mentioned that the mayor was completely blown away the moment the Jeodong Island reports dropped. The chairman instantly called a meeting, canceled every single appointment on his schedule, and decided to exclusively meet with me. The reason was crystal clear. A rookie soloing a level 3 origin point hadn't happened since the first-generation veteran hunters. Hearing that, I was a bit surprised myself. If someone had actually pulled off a feat like that before me, that person had to be absolute tough. A little while later, I arrived at the mayor's office, where Mayor Park Ji-il stood up to personally welcome me. He apologized for the abruptness and invited me to talk over coffee, mentioning that as the mayor of Incheon, Jeodong Island had always been his absolute biggest headache. But due to tight budget constraints, the city could never afford to hire a high-tier, expensive guild. Listening to him yap, I casually sipped my tea, mentally calculating how much profit I could squeeze out of this meeting. The moment the mayor found out I was still technically a rookie hunter, he suddenly got incredibly hyped. I couldn't really grasp why he was celebrating so hard. Then, he broke down how Incheon is one of the most critical hubs in Korea. Between the airport, the Free Economic Zone projects, and international districts like Songdo and Cheongna, billions in revenue circulate here daily, alongside constant foreign investment. He claimed that if I teamed up with him, he could make my hunter career insanely smooth and successful. Before he could even finish his sentence, I cut right in and asked, "With all this support you're offering, what exactly do you want from me? Are you trying to fix your absolute trash approval ratings, or are you just trying to secure the next election?" Hearing my bluntness, Lee Hyuk let out a faint cough, shocked by my words. The mayor tried to play it cool, stammering that my info network was pretty crazy. I just smiled and replied that I had literally just run a quick search on the internet. In reality, his term was wrapping up next year, and his chances of getting re-elected were practically zero. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he admitted I was an incredibly straight shooter. Then, he laid down his actual proposition. He explained that certain high-tier missions and requests require strict city government clearance, and as a rookie, I'd constantly need the mayor's personal approval. If I aligned with him, he could showcase me to the world as Incheon City's homegrown genius hunter, while naturally stacking the credit for my achievements under his own name. It was loud and clear. He didn't care about helping me. He just wanted to farm my credit. Following that, he started flexing his major corporate connections, slapping a premium coffee brand's package onto the table. He mentioned their current brand ambassador was getting swapped out soon, and I could easily become the next face of the company. He claimed he could hook me up with countless highly profitable endorsement deals. But I cut him off mid-sentence and asked, "Do you honestly think I'm going to settle for such a cheap deal, bro?" The second the words left my mouth, the color completely drained from his face. Desperate to salvage the situation, he argued that in these dark times, the world desperately needs a new hero. I calmly shot back. "All these things you're trying to bait me with, I'll easily secure them myself through my own grind down the line." Hearing this, he started frantically throwing out new offers, including highly secure and incredibly profitable commissions, but I had absolutely zero interest in any of them. As I walked out of the office, I left him with one final remark. "Pass along my congratulations to your current coffee model, because I'm skipping this offer, and that endorsement is staying right with him." When we got back into the car, the driver glanced at me through the mirror and asked, "Why do you even want to be a hunter?" I looked at him and said, "Look, if a toilet gets completely clogged and filth starts spilling everywhere, someone's got to roll up their sleeves, dive in, and clean it up. Guess I'm that guy." That answer was exactly what he wanted to hear. He noted that moving forward, I'd become both insanely skilled and incredibly famous, and soon, massive corporations and major TV shows would be lining up just to get a piece of me. I asked, "Do you think I'll change, though?" He replied that after tasting fame and success, a lot of hunters completely change up. Pointing toward the truce line, He noted that beyond it lie highly lethal corrosion zones crawling with terrifying monsters. Earth's absolute last safe haven is Korea, widely regarded as the world's final sanctuary. Then he added, "What you pulled off today is going to give people living in these brutal conditions a glimmer of hope. They're going to view you as a symbol of hope. I just want you to always remain that beacon." Listening to him, I fell silent for a few moments, deep in thought. But after living such a massive life packed with countless experiences, changing my core values wasn't going to be that easy. Far. Meanwhile, on the other side of Jiadong Island, two shadowy figures were lurking in the darkness. One of them remarked that the experiment they ran out there had completely fumbled. The man kneeling on his knees in front of them kept frantically begging for mercy, but he quickly added that he had some solid news to share. He pulled up an edited recording of the Hunter qualification exam and noted, "This rookie is genuinely built different." A short while later, the calendar flipped. On the 1st of every month, the National Hunter rankings get a major update. The entire country was glued to their screens, desperately waiting because everyone wanted to see who would bag the #1 spot this time. Even Seiyin was hyped, hoping my name might actually make the cut. When the official leaderboard dropped, the entire nation was left completely stunned. Seiyin was sitting at number 10, Kimchi secured number 5, Cho Urium grabbed number 3, Jang Taeseo took number 2, and locked firmly at the absolute #1 spot was my name. The moment the rankings went live, a massive press conference was called. Since a literal rookie had soloed a grade 3 rift, every single reporter in the room was laser-focused entirely on me. They kept firing off questions, demanding to know exactly how I cleared the zone. I answered their queries one by one with absolute composure. Finally, I announced I'd take just one last question. A reporter chimed in, asking, "What is your ultimate resolution moving forward?" I calmly replied, "I'm just going to keep locking in and giving it my absolute everything." Following the press conference, Association President Moon took me out to a specific location. He gave me a tour of a sector that used to house the Gonzalo prison. Now, all that was left was a colossal, gaping crater in the earth. Staring down into the abyss, Moon remarked, "What you're looking at right now is exactly what happened to countless nations across the globe." He explained that the second the corrosion rifts started popping up, multiple global governments and administrations completely collapsed. However, South Korea managed to hold the line, protect itself, and eventually emerged as a massive superpower. Not only that, but the nation made insane technological leaps. Pointing toward our helicopter, he noted that the chopper runs entirely on mana and completely cancels out any external noise. I asked, "So the countries that fumbled and couldn't halt the corrosion rifts, did they all end up like this?" Moon nodded and replied, "Yeah." He explained that after the rifts breached, multiple global capitals were entirely wiped off the map. Then, he led me even closer to the edge of the crater and said that there were once 8 of the most lethal corrosion rifts on the planet, and the Gonzalo incident was one of them. The catastrophe struck 13 years ago. Without a single shred of warning, the entire city was converted into a full-blown corrosion zone. A few people managed to survive initially, but ultimately, they couldn't escape the fallout either. Within a matter of days, the entire metropolis vanished without leaving a single trace behind. On our way back, Moon noted that while the global balance of power hadn't completely inverted, many major superpowers were running heavily weakened compared to before. Hearing all this gave me a solid grasp of the current world status. But one burning question still remained. Why on earth did he bring me all the way out here just to show me this? Right then, Moon finally dropped the real reason. He told me that a few days ago, a guy named Heo pulled up on behalf of the Taebok Guild to meet with him. The guy was completely pressed that I hadn't joined his guild and straight up demanded my address. But Moon flat out refused to leak my personal information. Following that, he warned me that the Taebok Guild operates strictly on a survival of the fittest mindset. If I don't comply with their demands, they might actively try to force me under their control. Hearing that was a bit surprising, but I already knew that as I was right now, I wasn't nearly strong enough to face Heian solo. Moon remarked that he figured I was the type of hunter who hated getting locked down by a guild and preferred to pave his own path. I agreed with his take. Then he noted that if I wanted to stop the Taebok Guild from treating me like an easy target, I needed to stack my reputation even higher. To achieve that, he suggested a play. I could start taking high-profile missions directly from the association president himself. Hearing this didn't shock me at all. I already had a hunch that there was a hidden agenda behind this play. I got straight to the point and asked, "What's the catch? I doubt you're handing out these exclusive missions just out of the goodness of your heart." Moon smirked and replied, "I just want to ensure that when you make it big, you remember exactly who threw you a lifeline." With that, he handed me an envelope and told me to review the details inside. I figured this opportunity could heavily work in my favor. Landing a mission directly from the association president was the absolute fastest way to shoot my stock up. I asked, "All right, what's the play?" Moon explained that my task was to escort a cargo ship traveling from Bushian all the way to Nanning City. He broke down how ever since the corrosion rifts scaled up, global transportation had become insanely dangerous and complicated. I started skimming through the cargo manifest, and my eyes instantly caught the list of luxury items on board. They were even shipping a whole car. I remarked in disbelief, "I seriously don't get why people still consider trash like this essential." Moon replied, "Everything on this list is a literal necessity for certain individuals." But his logic made zero sense to me. I shot back. When half the nations on the planet have been completely wiped out, what actual value does this stuff even hold? Moon explained that even after the corrosion rifts shattered the world, international politics didn't just vanish. This wasn't just a basic delivery run. It was a high-stakes play to maintain diplomatic ties between nations. The second the words left his mouth, I unbuckled my seatbelt and stated, "Yeah, I'm skipping this mission." Moon was completely taken aback. He argued that the Korean government views this operation as incredibly critical. I calmly shot back. Dragging myself into international politics would be an absolute clown move. Hearing my response, Moon got heavily triggered and reminded me that I was still just a green rookie hunter. But I didn't give a single damn. I grabbed the mission file, hurled it straight out of the helicopter, and popped the door open. I thanked him for the ride, told him I'd make my own way back to Seoul, and without a single shred of hesitation, dove straight out of the chopper into the ocean. The expression on Moon's face was absolutely priceless. A little while later, a dock worker was chilling at the Incheon port when he spotted something unusual in the water. The next split second, a hand broke through the surface. It was me. Dragging myself onto the shore, I muttered in an exhausted voice, "Man, I genuinely thought I was going to take the L today." The worker stared at me wide-eyed and stammered, "L looks like you've been through absolute hell, bro." I simply muttered, "Yeah." At that exact moment, it became crystal clear what I needed more than anything else: raw power. I was going to take on the most lethal missions available, slowly grind my way to the absolute top, and become so overwhelmingly powerful that nobody could ever pressure me again. Scrolling through missions on my terminal, one specific request caught my eye. It was a hostage rescue mission to save kidnapped civilians on Tsushima Island, with an estimated difficulty tier of grade 2. Reading the details, I took a deep breath. It was obvious that any hope of a long rest was officially out the window. On September 3rd, a few fishermen from Tanyang had ventured out into the ocean for the shrimp fishing season. Right around that time, rift monsters had set up their nests on the island and harvested those fishermen like literal prey. Only a single guy had barely managed to escape with his life. According to his account, the rest of the fishermen were still breathing. Because of that, the association put out a high-priority contract to rescue the hostages and eliminate the rift monsters. If I soloed a mission of this caliber, it would secure me a legendary hero reputation and massively boost my rank. But as heavy as the bag was, the danger was equally crazy. I had already heard that the higher a monster's tier scales, the more catastrophic it gets. Level 3 monsters pack the destructive power of actual military tanks. Level 2 monsters are basically treated as walking natural disasters. And Level 1 monsters? Those things are literal living nightmares. Deleting just one of them could require the coordinated military output of an entire nation. I began brainstorming who to bring along on this run. Suddenly, a name popped into my head. If she tagged along, this mission would become a whole lot easier. Before long, deployment day arrived. Suddenly, someone called out my name from behind. It was my teammate, Hanso. She asked, "How much longer until we touch down on the island?" I verified my coordinates on the terminal and replied, "About another hour. Keep your energy stored up. Like I told you before, I'll let you know when it's time to lock in." This mission was going to scale way higher in difficulty than our last run, but her focus wasn't even on my words. She was staring dead at the armor equipped on my shoulder. She asked, "Is that the Iron Wing Angel arm guard? Judging by the premium leather finish, that looks like a super rare, limited edition model." Then she demanded to know where on earth I managed to cop it. I replied, "A scrap recovery dealer gifted it to me." Hearing that, she went completely silent for a second. She had locked in a contract with a recovery dealer too, but she had never received a premium drop like that. I looked over at her and said, "Do you seriously want the answer to that, Lil Bro?" Then I reminded her that we are simply not on the same level. I'm the hunter who soloed a level 3 rift, while you're still a rookie riding on nothing but your reputation as an Academy Honor student. My mind flashed back to a few days ago when I had dialed Hanso to ask if she wanted to join me on a raid. The exact second she heard the mission details, a cold sweat broke out across her forehead. The previous mission had almost pushed her to the brink of death, and the trauma was still incredibly fresh. I had waited for her response, but the other side of the line was dead silent. Ultimately, I asked her a straight question. I wanted to know if she was genuinely serious about getting stronger. I reminded her that during our last run, she explicitly stated she wanted to copy my fighting style. I told her that if she was still locked into that mindset, I could train her. Not only that, but if she ran missions by my side and learned from me, she could scale her power up multiple times over. Hanso had her own deep reasons for wanting to get strong. No matter how dangerous the path ahead was, she had already decided to walk it, even if the road forward felt like walking on a razor's edge. A little while later, we spotted an anomaly off in the distance. We both instantly shifted into high alert. 5 boats were anchored right ahead. I figured this setup was going to be a bit tricky. To reach our destination, we needed to clear this sector without making a single sound. But the very next split second, Hanso levitated straight up into the air. I had zero clue she possessed an ability like that. She let out a loud laugh and mocked. Wow, so there are things you can't pull off. She kept clowning me, saying that if I couldn't even manage a basic trick like this, it was low-key embarrassing. But she didn't realize that the moment she started laughing, my face went dead serious. Without saying a word, I gave her a sharp flick right on her forehead and commanded, "Quit yapping and carry me while you fly." Then I warned her, "Don't get a single drop of water on my gear. I literally just bought these clothes." Shortly after, a strange sensation hit me, and my eyes locked onto the nearest boat anchored ahead. I told Hanso to head straight for the closest vessel. I could feel heavy waves of mana radiating off it. The further we advanced, the heavier the magical density scaled. A moment later, Hanso touched us down right on the deck of one of the boats. She suddenly noticed a figure standing perfectly still on the deck. Right around that same time, I vaulted onto the ship and told her to look closer. I explained, "No actual human moves with a rigid posture like that." That's when the reality of the situation hit her. The entire deck was absolutely crawling with zombies. Hanso crashed heavily onto the deck, making a loud thud, stepped down. I frowned and said, "Don't land like that, bro. Do that too many times and your knees are going to be completely cooked." To make matters worse, the sheer noise from her impact started drawing every single zombie in the vicinity straight toward us. But Hanso barely paid attention to my nagging. She instantly stomped the deck and unleashed a massive burst of her power. In her mind, if she fumbled against low-tier zombies like this, how was she ever going to survive the real fights ahead? However, the very next split second, the stray lightning she discharged almost clipped me. I immediately chewed her out, saying, "You're burning way too much mana for absolutely no reason." If she kept fighting like this, she'd run on fumes in a hot minute. Stacking high-tier techniques against low-level trash zombies was a total waste. Hanso went silent for a second. It clicked for her that I had officially started training her, so she decided to take the advice. But in her playbook, holding back apparently meant something entirely different. Sure, the zombie got deleted in a single hit, but I could tell she was still applying way too much output. She seriously needed to learn how to store her energy. Every single time she launched an attack, I kept telling her to drop the power output lower and lower. Hanso's childhood had been filled with absolute struggle, which was exactly why she swore she would never live as a weakling again. Suddenly, a zombie lunged at her, jaws wide open. Its teeth were inches from tearing into her skin when, in that exact millisecond, a flash of lightning erupted so fast it was completely invisible to the naked eye. If walking through literal hell was what it took to scale up her strength, she was ready to take that path without a single shred of hesitation. A little while later, Hanso wiped out the remaining monsters and asked if we were finally done. I told her I had already cleared the monsters on the other boats while she was busy. She gave me a quiet thank you, admitting she had learned a massive amount from my tips. I jokingly replied, "Don't even sweat the thank you, lil bro." The world is full of people who get handed free knowledge right to their face and still don't learn a single thing. Hearing my words, she dropped a statement I absolutely did not see coming. She mentioned that this was the first time in her entire life that someone had actually trained her the right way. I was low-key, stunned. I asked, "Then what on earth were they even teaching you at the academy?" She explained that because she naturally picked up everything incredibly fast, her instructors never saw a reason to teach her the absolute basics. I let out a laugh and said, "You know, if I keep training you like this, you might actually end up stronger than me one day." Tears literally started welling up in her eyes. She noted that up until now, she had never been able to surpass any of her teachers. Seeing her get emotional like that was a bit surprising. I calmly told her, "Don't stress, that's never happening with me." My actual plan was to keep her looking up to my grind for the rest of her life. After that, we prepared to move deeper into the island. The sailors mentioned they would stay on standby right here if we needed a quick extract. Before deploying, I reviewed the survivors' report one more time. According to the data, the hostages were being held inside a shrine. Hanso noted that the island actually had 2 shrines, the Gajun Shrine and the Adumi Shrine. Factoring in the distance and coordinates, I decided we should clear the Gajun Shrine first. Hanso calculated that traveling there on foot would take about a hot 2 hours. For me, reaching the venue wasn't the real headache. The real problem was the trip back. The survivors' report listed 15 hostages. Escorting that many civilians back safely was going to be an absolute chore. On top of that, I could feel an incredibly hostile wave of mana radiating from beyond the thick fog. I was absolutely certain that the exact second we secured the hostages, every single corrosion creature on the island would slide on us. Right as I was mapping out the play, my eyes caught a vehicle parked a short distance away. I instantly turned to Hanso and asked, "Yo, can you drive?" She backed herself up with total confidence, saying, "Yeah, easily." But just a few minutes later, I was deeply regretting that decision. Hanso was driving like today was her absolute last day on Earth. She laughed and yelled over the engine, "If you hate my driving, pull up and take the wheel yourself." I told her to forget it, vaulted straight onto the roof of the vehicle, and prepared to handle the monsters swarming us from behind. I whipped out my arrow sling and fired a heavy projectile straight into the pursuing pack. A single hit deleted multiple monsters instantly. When the weapon snapped back to me, it sliced through even more of them midair. Suddenly, I glanced to the left flank and spotted more monsters leaping straight toward us. I instantly yelled a warning to Hanso. She responded with a maneuver that left even me completely stunned. To evade the monsters, she drifted the car so violently that the vehicle was literally running on just 2 wheels for a hot second. At that exact moment, I realized I absolutely should have been the one driving. We barreled down the deserted road at absolute maximum speed with the monster horde hot on our heels. A short while later, we finally pulled up to the Gajin Shrine. Hanso panicked, noting that the monsters were still locking onto us. I told her not to sweat it and that I'd handle the crowd. The moment we came to a halt, I deployed the Paradox Flame right across the entrance. The wall of fire instantly incinerated any monster that tried to breach the perimeter. With the entrance fully secured, we headed deep inside the shrine and located the hostages within moments. Hanso stepped forward, introduced herself, and assured them we were here for the rescue. But instead of celebrating, the civilians had a completely different reaction. Tears started streaming down their faces as they frantically begged Hanso to turn around and run for her life immediately. Right then, a creature raised its weapon, fully prepared to execute a heavy strike on Hanso. I cut right in, parrying the attack before it could even touch her. Without taking my eyes off the enemy, I commanded Hanso to get all the survivors back to the vehicle while I handled this ghost samurai. The next split second, the ghost samurai launched another assault. I raised my bare hand and blocked the sword strike cleanly. Simultaneously, it leaped into the air, executing a heavy overhead strike. The sheer pressure of its blade came crashing down on me. I gritted my teeth and blocked it head on. Right at the exact millisecond its blade was locked in front of my face, Hanso slammed the accelerator and drove the vehicle straight at us. With a massive crash, the vehicle slammed dead into the ghost samurai, sending him flying into the distance. She screamed out to me, "Get in the car! Fast!" I vaulted straight inside the vehicle and asked if all the hostages were secured. She confirmed everyone was safe. The moment I looked up, my eyes locked onto an absolute sea of zombies staring dead at us. My expression instantly turned serious. The ghost samurai had taken a heavy hit from the car, but he was already standing back up, entirely alive. Without wasting a single beat, I locked eyes with Hanso and commanded, "Give me your sword." She was completely taken aback and snapped, "Are you losing your mind, bro?" For a swordsman, letting someone else take your blade was considered the ultimate disrespect. I replied in a calm, cold tone, "Make a choice real quick? Your pride as a swordsman, or these civilian lives?" She went silent for a second. After a quick internal battle, she finally tossed her sword straight to me. I caught the blade, feeling out its balance. Honestly, I didn't expect I'd have to resort to using a sword this early in the game. My mind instantly flashed back to a few days ago when I was grinding inside the level 3 corrosion rift on Jiadong Island. Right there, I had copped a glowing glove. Looking closely at the drop, I realized it was no ordinary gear. The moment I discovered it could absorb and store ambient magical power, I realized its true value. On the surface, it looked like a basic piece of equipment that just held magical energy, but to me, it was way more than that. It was a literal mana battery. By my calculations, its maximum capacity could support my output for about a solid 5 minutes. and those 5 minutes alone were probably enough to scale me up close to Lee Soon's tier. Shifting my focus back to the current clash, I gripped the sword tighter and activated my magical power. The very next split second, I unleashed dozens of sword energy slashes in a single breath. The zombies started dropping one by one. Hanso was standing there completely awestruck. In a fraction of time, I had soloed a massive portion of the horde entirely on my own. The second the path ahead was cleared, I turned to Hanso and ordered, "Don't look back. Drive straight for the harbor." She nodded fiercely and slammed the accelerator to the floor. A little while later, we neared the harbor checkpoints. I figured the worst part of the run was officially over, but I was dead wrong. Suddenly, another massive horde of zombies came sprinting at us from behind. Hanso panicked, shouting that the vehicle wasn't going to hold up much longer. I cut her off instantly and told her to just keep driving, but she was still stressing, arguing that at this speed, the zombies were going to catch us and force the L. Right then, something happened that absolutely nobody anticipated. Every single zombie pursuing us froze dead in their tracks. The entire crowd literally solidified on the spot. Hanso stared back at them in pure disbelief, as if an invisible wall had just dropped right in front of them. That's when my previous explanation clicked in her head. This was the divine protection method, an elite technique used to suppress monsters. I had mentioned it to her before, though I had also told her she'd never be able to learn it. It was a technique I had picked up back in the other world. A moment later, the vehicle slowly rolled to a stop. She looked at me and asked if this method could literally beat any monster. I looked back at her and said, "Don't make it sound that simple, bro. The divine protection method isn't some magical fix for every single scenario." Right at that exact second, a heavy, chilling voice echoed from nearby. The ghost samurai had returned. He muttered in a low, raspy tone, "Sacrifices must be protected." Hearing that voice, Hanso's entire body locked up with intense stress. But I instantly realized that this ghost samurai wasn't as massive a threat as he seemed. The guy just possessed Mind's Eye, an advanced trait that allows a fighter to sense and read incoming attacks far beyond the standard 5 senses. For Hanso, grasping a concept like this on her own was a massive stretch. Even elite masters struggle to comprehend such high-tier traits. In her mind, it was statistically impossible for a literal corpse to possess an advanced ability like that. I glanced at her trembling hands and said in a calm tone, "Stop shaking. There's zero reason to fear this guy. At the end of the day, traits like Mind's Eye and other similar techniques are basically just an illusion." I told her, "Watch closely. After this, I'm going to break down exactly how you dismantle these kinds of abilities." With that, I began slowly walking straight toward the ghost samurai. Hanso watched me step up, completely stunned, unable to comprehend why on earth I was going out to face him entirely solo. I noted, abilities like Mind's Eye are only effective against those who rely on brute force without any real battle knowledge. It's a trait that only people who have survived countless life and death struggles manage to unlock. Over time, that raw experience simply becomes their instinct. Honestly, sometimes just throwing out your pure killing intent is more than enough to completely paralyze your opponent. Of course, reaching that tier isn't something just anyone can pull off. Hearing my breakdown, Hanso started connecting all the high-level concepts she had never even heard of before. In her mind, it felt like I had already transcended into a completely different realm of enlightenment. Right then, I tightened my grip on the blade. I casually swung the sword once, then twice. That was literally all it took. In just 2 clean slashes, the ghost samurai was cleanly bifurcated at the waist, cut into 2 pieces. Looking down at its remains, I muttered, "There was absolutely nothing special about this guy. People don't actually fear the technique. They just get intimidated by the name and the title. Those titles just create a literal illusion in people's minds." I turned to Hanso and added, "On a real battlefield, the name of a technique means absolutely zero." After hearing my entire speech, Hanso went dead silent. She started reflecting on the fact that throughout this entire mission, she had basically done nothing. She always talked about giving it her absolute everything, but my actual strength scaled way past anything she could even comprehend. When she looked back up at me, the expression in her eyes had completely changed. This time, it was pure, unadulterated determination. She stated in a clear voice, "Train me properly from now on." Her sudden request low-key surprised me because, in my book, I was already teaching her. But Hanso shook her head and clarified that she didn't just want casual tips anymore. She needed straight, high-intensity training. She admitted she finally realized just how weak she actually was and needed to scale up her strength as fast as humanly possible. I asked her, "Why are you in such a massive rush to get strong?" Without missing a single beat, she shot back, "I want to personally delete Club Shetty with my own 2 hands." Club Shetty was ranked among the 8 most catastrophic corrosion rifts on the entire planet. It was the exact same rift that had literally swallowed the entire Himalayas in a single disaster. Hearing her response, it clicked that her dream scaled way bigger than regular people. I asked, "Is this all for revenge?" She instantly replied, "Yeah." She explained that everything she was grinding for was strictly to avenge her family. Then she added that she wasn't asking for my help for free. She slid me a card. The second my eyes locked onto it, I recognized it instantly. It was a KYC Group card. That conglomerate packed a staggering market value of 257 trillion. Staring at it, I was genuinely stunned. Hanso explained that the corporate empire belonged to her family, currently run by her grandfather. However, she had personally stepped away from the succession battle. I immediately put the pieces together. If she emerged as a highly successful hunter, she'd naturally get dragged right back into that corporate warfare. I looked at her and asked, "What exactly do you want from me then?" Her answer was straight to the point. "Make me the absolute best." In return, she promised to supply me with top-tier elixirs and other ultra-rare resources. She mentioned she could source premium items that were statistically impossible to cop through normal channels. According to her, the high-quality elixirs she could pull would easily scale me up to a tier ordinary people could never dream of reaching. But what she didn't know was that I had already reached that legendary tier a lifetime ago. Right now, I wasn't just chasing power for myself. My ultimate goal was to structurally restore Earth back to the way it used to be. Ultimately, I shook her hand and locked in the deal. Right after, I handed her a detailed manifest of the specific materials I needed, then noted, "First, let's get these rescued hostages checked into a hospital." Once all the hostages were safely admitted to the medical facility, Hanso pulled the doctor aside and asked how long their recovery would take. The physician explained that 7 of the survivors were battling severe malnutrition, meaning it would take at least a hot week before they could fully stabilize and talk properly. He assured us that the exact second their condition improved, we'd get an immediate ping, but for now, they strictly needed bed rest. I agreed with the doctor's assessment. Following that, I called Hanso over and stated, "Your training starts right now." We pulled up to a training ground. Before kicking off the grind, I decided to run a quick test. I asked, "If I thrust my spear at maximum velocity, do you think you can dodge it?" After thinking it over for a second, she admitted that pulling that off would be incredibly tough. Noting the skill gap between us was just too massive, I shot back, "Nah, you can pull it off. If you push all your senses to their absolute limits, you can easily evade it." I broke it down for her. Track it with your eyes, listen with your ears, sense it with your nose, and read every single pressure shift in the air with your skin. The second all your senses synchronize, you won't be fighting out of habit anymore. You'll be moving out of pure awareness. After laying down the theory, I decided to jump straight into the practical application. Before Hanso could even process what was happening, I completely vanished from her line of sight. She frantically started scanning the perimeter to locate me. The very next split second, I was standing right behind her, the tip of my spear pressed gently against her neck. I noted, "You fumbled the very first play. You were way too slow." I explained that perception always comes first, followed by execution. On a real battlefield, you don't have a luxury minute to brainstorm your next move. The exact millisecond the data registers, you have to move instantly. With that, I officially kicked the practical training into overdrive. Right around that time, a security guard stationed nearby was tracking our training session. A few moments later, his partner pulled up too, and both of them just stood there entirely frozen, watching the show. Right before their eyes, the entire training ground was getting absolutely demolished. Hanso and I were constantly trading high-intensity blows, our weapons repeatedly clashing with enough force to structurally shatter the surrounding concrete. I was intentionally making the training setup insanely difficult for her. If she wanted to get strong fast, I had to push her past her absolute limits, afar. Suddenly, I vaulted high into the air, locking in a massively powerful overhead strike. The second Hanso clocked the incoming attack, she instantly realized dodging it was statistically impossible. But right before the blow could connect, a voice yelled out from the sidelines. One of the security guards pings me, shouting that one of the survivors among the hostages had just regained consciousness. Hearing that, I killed my momentum and halted the training right there. For today at least, Hanso had successfully learned how to execute a proper block. For now, that was a solid win. A few minutes later, the two of us stepped inside the medical facility. I walked up to the survivor's bed and asked how he was holding up. He nodded, saying he was feeling stable. Then, he started breaking down exactly what went down during their captivity. According to his account, a massive transport truck had pulled up to the site, and a group of strange individuals had stepped out. Hanso cut in, asking, were they held captive just like the rest of the hostages? The survivor immediately shook his head, refuting the idea completely. He noted that those people didn't look like prisoners at all. They were entirely calm. The most bizarre part was that instead of attacking them, the monsters were actively helping them out. He went on to explain that those individuals handpicked a few specific hostages, loaded them into the truck, and rolled out. The second he dropped that info, all the pieces instantly connected in my brain. That explained perfectly why there were only 7 hostages left at the shrine. I immediately asked him about the specific survivor who had supposedly managed to escape the island on his own. Hearing his response, both Hanso and I were completely stunned. He revealed that the guy hadn't actually escaped at all. Those people had intentionally let him slide and walk away. Once the brief wrapped up, the entire play became crystal clear to both of us. I muttered. I was already wondering how a regular civilian managed to successfully escape a zone where a high-tier hunter like Hanso struggled to even breach. Hanso looked at me, wide-eyed, and asked, "So you think the entire rescue mission was a literal trap right from the jump?" My expression turned dead serious. I quietly muttered, "The people behind this play genuinely have some insane nerve." Hanso was completely lost, unable to read whether I was triggered because the enemy was low-key underestimating me, or because they had straight-up used innocent civilians as literal bait. Before clearing out, we asked the survivor if he could recall any other distinct details. After racking his brain for a second, he dropped one final clue. He noted that one of the guys who stepped out of the truck had a distinct cat mascot keychain hanging from his waist. Later on, using that exact lead, Hanso successfully tracked the guy down in record time. I looked at her, surprised, and asked, "How on earth did you locate him that fast, bro?" She glanced back at me and simply said, "That's literally what smartphones are for." Defending my lack of tech knowledge, I muttered, "Look, for regular folks like me, just running a quick search on the internet faces a massive data bill." Hanso just stared at me, completely unable to believe what she was hearing. A short while later, we finally tracked down the exact guy we were hunting. His entire face was completely loaded with piercings. The moment my eyes locked onto him, I let out a smirk and jeered, "Yo, did you use a straight-up sewing machine to stitch up that ugly face of yours?" But internally, I already recognized that this guy was no ordinary small fry. He introduced himself as Kim Jian and boldly stated, "Only one of you two is making it out of here alive today." To back up his threat, he grabbed a random guy standing nearby and hurled him straight into an active corrosion rift. Hanso couldn't even process what was happening. A human trapped inside a corrosion rift stands zero chance of escaping unless the core gets completely deleted. Right before our eyes, the guy's body started violently contorting. Within seconds, his physical structure mutated, and he transformed into a literal corrosion creature. Kim Jian inspected the mutation, muttered that the test subject was completely useless, and deleted him on the spot with a single heavy kick. Hanso was visibly shaken, her voice trembling as she asked, "Are you planning to do that to us too?" Kim Jian wasn't playing around at all. He calmly replied, "Average test subjects don't drop quality results." At that exact millisecond, the whole play clicked. These guys weren't trafficking hostages to secure a financial bag. They strictly needed the hostages as raw material for mutations. Kim Jian added that he personally didn't give a damn, but his older brother had instructed him to clearly explain the agenda to us before executing the plan. He revealed that they were the literal descendants of Dangun, and their ultimate goal was to fiercely preserve and massively scale up South Korea's dominant power. With that statement, he stomped the ground with absolute force. Honestly, at that moment, I couldn't even comprehend half of the nonsense he was yapping about. The very next split second, he launched a heavy kick straight into a parked car nearby. The vehicle came flying directly toward us at insane velocity, completely throwing me for a loop, slicing the flying vehicle clean in half. I stated in a cold tone, "In my book, our nation is already ranked among the absolute biggest global superpowers. We don't need your trash method." But Kim Jian went completely off the deep end, becoming even more unhinged. He snapped back that it was still nowhere near enough. He wanted Korea to become a dominant force that every single citizen could farm aura with, a nation that no other country on Earth could ever look down on, a superpower backed by such overwhelming superhuman capabilities that nobody would ever dare to oppose them. He yelled, "Remember our country's history! That was exactly when foreign nations ruled over us." I will never forget that absolute humiliation. That is precisely why we are going to reclaim everything that belongs to us. Right then, I realized Kim Jian was a Taekwondo black belt. The guy didn't have a single piece of equipment equipped, yet his velocity scaled way past my initial expectations. I was barely managing to weather the storm of his attacks. Internally, I had to admit that if the corrosion zones were actually eradicated for good, his logic wasn't entirely cap. Without them, it wouldn't be easy for Korea to preserve its current standing. but I looked him dead in the eye and asked, "What actual difference does any of that make when innocent civilians are dropping dead in massive numbers?" Then I fired a straight question. "What exactly matters the most right now?" Kim Jian burst out laughing and jeered. "Bro, you're the one who completely fails to comprehend the vision. We've successfully unlocked the method to structurally control the corrosion zones." A faint glint flashed across my eyes. I noted, "If you can genuinely control the corrosion zones, that means the entire planet can remain secure. If the conditions align, I might actually consider teaming up with you. But first, break down exactly how far your control scales." Kim Jian spat back with absolute disdain. "Why on earth would I leak that data to you? Just know that we've successfully reined them in to a massive degree." I instantly caught his slip and mocked. "So not fully then?" "Just to a certain extent, exactly as I calculated." The exact millisecond he heard that, he stomped the concrete with maximum force and launched his next assault. I barely managed to parry the strike. At that moment, a single thought crossed my mind. Yeah, I definitely dragged this out a hot minute. Honestly, my goal wasn't even to drop him right then. I was just buying time to let my mana pool regenerate. As I was right now, my output wasn't heavy enough to ignite the paradox flame at maximum capacity. Suddenly, Hanso spun her blade and unleashed a heavy crescent slash of sword light straight toward Kim Jian. Kim Jian laughed it off and mocked. "Wow, I figured you'd be too terrified to even move, but I didn't expect a pretty girl like you to actually have some nerve." I immediately yelled back to Hanso, warning her not to challenge him head-on. She shouted back that she noticed my gauntlet takes a hot minute to charge up, asking if that was the exact window of time I needed. Without even waiting for my confirmation, she popped open an elixir bottle. "How much time?" she demanded. I replied, 5 minutes. She instantly chugged the elixir, hurled the empty bottle into the brush, and stated with absolute confidence, "Leave this to me." I stared at her for a second and asked, "Seriously? How many elixirs do you even have packed away? Do you own a literal factory or something?" She replied that this was strictly for emergencies. I quietly muttered that I respected the hustle, repeating that I just needed a solid 5 minutes. She locked eyes with me and said, "You are not allowed to take the L here." The very next split second, Kim Jian blitzed straight toward Hanso with maximum velocity. A twisted smirk plastered across his face. He jeered, "Honestly, I'm low-key worried I won't be able to hold back my output and I'll accidentally delete you in a single kick." But suddenly, the needle guy sensed a massive shift. In the blink of an eye, Hanso closed the distance with lightning speed. Blood instantly sprayed from his mouth as it clicked for him that Hanso's strike had connected clean. But without pausing for a single beat, he spun around and delivered a devastating counterkick, sending Hanso flying into the distance. She hit the ground, blood pooling from her lips. I instantly rushed over to stabilize her, then turned my gaze toward the needle guy and stated, "Get ready to take the ultimate L." His eyes narrowed in pure shock. He demanded, "How on earth did your magical density spike that high instantly? Have you been capping about your true power this entire time?" I replied with a completely deadpan expression. "There's absolutely zero reason to be flabbergasted, bro. The underlying principle is exactly like the piercings plastered all over your ugly face." Kim Jian froze dead in his tracks and snapped, "How could you possibly know about that?" Glaring back at him, I shot back, "You still haven't figured it out? That proves you're a literal idiot?" I signaled for him to analyze the surrounding perimeter. Purified magic is literally leaking heavily into the atmosphere. The magical capacity inside your body scaled past its threshold a long time ago, which is why it's constantly bleeding out in the open. And thanks to your absolute carelessness, I finally harvested enough ambient magic to ignite the paradox flame. Kim Jian screamed in pure rage, "That's absolute cap! Nobody on Earth can naturally absorb discarded magical energy!" My tone grew stone cold as I stated, "You don't even need to worry about the facts anymore, because today is officially the day you get deleted." The very next split second, I activated my advanced technique, Blue Trajectory. Soul hits, while simultaneously unleashing the paradox flame straight at him. The combined strike tore clean through his physical form. Kim Jian could barely catch his breath, quickly realizing the problem wasn't just his lungs fumbling. The reality was way worse. He couldn't even feel his own heartbeat anymore. He was relying purely on his remaining magical output just to maintain his standing posture. I had already completely incinerated every single ounce of muscular strength in his body. Finding himself entirely cornered, Kim Jian panicked for the first time, screaming out for his captain to slide in for the save. The exact second those words left his mouth, a blinding flash of light erupted right before my eyes. My entire body instantly locked into an automatic combat response. After parrying the heavy incoming projectile, I scanned the area to see who exactly had the nerve to interfere. The attacker was visibly stunned himself, never anticipating I'd deploy my spear and execute a clean counterattack that fast. He openly praised my reflexes and raw battle instincts. My heart low-key sank for a fraction of a second. No shot someone in this era was still using traditional Korean archery. This guy was the exact Captain Kim Ji-an was screaming for. Judging by the colossal energy waves radiating off his frame, it was loud and clear the guy fully earned his title. Whether I liked it or not, I had to admit he was easily 2 times stronger than Lee Soon, maybe even scaling 3 to 4 times higher. Right then, the hooded man stationed on the roof finally spoke up. He started by praising my audacity, then asked, "Are you not terrified of death, kid?" Looking up at the roof, I calmly replied, "If your actual goal was to delete me, I'd already be dead by now." With that statement, I raised my hand and reignited my bizarre black fire. The second the flames flared up, Kim Ji-an, who was still engulfed in the paradox flame, let out an even more agonizing shriek. Hearing his screams, the hooded man barked a direct command. "Extinguish those flames on Kim Ji-an right now. I will not repeat myself." At that exact millisecond, the whole play made perfect sense. Kim Ji-an's personal mana pool was completely drained. The only thing keeping him breathing was the hooded man's magic constantly tethering him. More importantly, if that arrow from earlier had locked onto my skull instead of my wrist, I would have taken the ultimate L right then and there. Ultimately, Kim Ji-an couldn't hold out any longer. His consciousness gradually faded to black. The hooded man closed the distance in a flash, catching him right before he collapsed, then glared at me and demanded, "Do you even comprehend what you've just done to Kim Ji-an?" He broke down the damage, stating that all the muscular strength in his frame was entirely gone. For the rest of his life, he'd have to manually circulate blood through his body using pure magic power, spending the remainder of his days locked in a wheelchair. Then, in a chilling tone, he added, "I'm taking you back alive. As long as you're still drawing breath, that's more than enough for me." Without wasting a single breath, I shot back, "Pull up and try it then. I'd rather blow myself to pieces right here than ever live as your literal puppet." But before he could fully decipher the underlying principle of my paradox flame, the hooded man retreated. As he dipped, he dropped one final statement. "When the corrosion rifts first breached, nobody believed they could be controlled either. But I proved them wrong." He locked eyes with me and added, "One day, you two will be standing right under my absolute dominion." With that, his form vanished in a split second, completely disappearing from my line of sight. Once he cleared out, I realized that a short-tempered, unhinged lunatic had just locked me in as his next target. Hanso realized it too, noting that these guys were desperate to farm my unique trait. She asked, "Do you seriously think terrorists care about standard rules?" I told her to closely analyze the hidden agenda driving this entire scenario. The second I said that, the realization hit her, and she gasped, "Wait, is it possible the Korean government itself doesn't want this threat cleared out?" I laid out my theory, noting that this entire rogue faction had likely been receiving direct, high-level backing from deep within the government right from the jump. Hearing this, Hanso panicked on the spot, stammering, "Then, should we have just skipped clearing this corrosion rift entirely?" I replied in a completely relaxed manner, "Honestly, I don't give a damn about any of that. We're just going to act like we know absolutely nothing about this tea." She made a weird face and muttered, "Bro, I am absolute trash at capping." I took a deep breath because I already knew that was facts. But right now, we had to handle the immediate problem staring us down. I turned to her and said, "Wait outside. I'm heading into the interior completely solo." She looked worried and asked, "Are you certain you don't need me to slide with you?" I turned back and stated, "You have zero clue what kind of absolute horror they've cooked up inside this place. Stand your ground right here. Take a breather, regenerate your energy, and wait for my return." With that final instruction, I took a massive leap, diving straight into the depths of the corrosion rift. After navigating a pitch-black underground tunnel, I officially breached the interior of the Tsushima Island Level 2 corrosion rift. A few moments later, I found myself standing dead in front of the gates of a massive, ancient Japanese-style fortress. Now I was completely certain this was a true Level 2 zone. I had initially expected to run into some cliché, terrifying castle built out of rotting corpses, but the sheer structural stability of the building standing before me made the vibe 10 times more ominous. Not only that, but the ambient magical fog here scaled incredibly dense. With every single breath I took, it felt like literal needles of ice were piercing straight into my lungs. Deep down, I knew that behind these gates lay the answers to every single question I had. Usually, I'm not the type of guy to overthink before throwing hands, but this time, the stakes were high enough that I had to map out every single possibility in advance. The moment I stepped into the main chamber, my eyes locked onto a massive black vat radiating a bizarre, toxic green light. Inspecting the anomaly closer, I realized it wasn't just a basic container. It was a colossal cauldron. I could barely believe my own eyes, turned out. This was the actual core of a level 2 corrosion rift. What stood right before my eyes completely defied all my expectations. Right then, I caught a super faint sound, and my eyes snapped instantly toward it. A man was lying flat on the floor, his entire body covered in brutal gashes. At that exact millisecond, something started emerging from inside that massive cauldron. The man on the ground shrieked in pure agony. "My legs are completely gone! I can't take the pain anymore!" But the very next second, a thick, fleshy tail whipped out from inside the vat, wrapped clean around him while he was still breathing, and dragged him straight into the cauldron. His final, desperate scream for help completely dissolved into that bizarre green light. Witnessing that layout instantly flashed my mind back to the other world. The echoes of countless people screaming and begging for a save started ringing in my ears. The scene ahead was so utterly stomach-turning that my stomach literally started churning, and I immediately clamped my hand over my mouth. These people are absolute filth. They literally built a factory just to offer up live human sacrifices. But this setup scaled entirely different from any sacrifice I had ever witnessed before. Right at that exact second, a bizarre creature materialized dead in front of me. The moment my eyes locked onto the katana gripped in its hand, it clicked instantly. This was a female samurai entity. The figure drew her katana and commanded, "Draw your blade too. I want to structurally reinforce my steel with your blood." Sensing the staggering pressure bleeding off her frame, a wave of panic rushed through me. If a swordsman this overwhelmingly powerful was operating under someone else's control, it meant that somewhere out there, an entity even stronger than the captain was pulling the strings. I was mid-thought when she suddenly blitzed straight toward me. Her katana came within inches of clean taking my head off. I barely managed to evade the strike, realizing right then and there how lethal this enemy actually was. I decided to unleash my maximum output right from the jump, before she could map out my weaknesses. I launched a full-power assault, aiming to delete her in a single, decisive strike. But I was left completely flabbergasted. She blocked my most powerful attack effortlessly using just her katana. The most terrifying part? My brain couldn't even process when she executed the block. The very next split second, her katana sliced clean through my frame, leaving a deep, severe cut across my body. For the first time in this run, I felt genuine fear. This opponent was moving way faster than I had calculated. She let out a faint smirk and remarked, "Impressive. You actually forced me to miss your vital points." Then, as if she was thoroughly enjoying the game, she started raining down a barrage of lightning-fast, merciless attacks on me, constantly hacking away until I dropped straight to my knees. The situation was completely spiraling out of control. At this point, I had no other choice but to ignite the paradox flame. But the absolute biggest hurdle was that this enemy wasn't technically alive like a normal human, meaning the paradox flame wouldn't drop a massive chunk of damage on her directly. I was completely out of ideas. Even so, I used the paradox flame to structurally force myself back onto my feet. She looked at me, smirking faintly, and asked, "Seriously, what is it going to take to actually keep you down?" The very next split second, she sliced through my frame multiple times again. This time, my condition fumbled way worse than before. It felt like every single muscle in my body had literally ruptured, and I was on the absolute verge of passing out. The only saving grace was that the muscles above my shoulders were still functioning. I used the paradox flame to put my healing on overdrive, instantly stitching the torn muscles back together so fast that I materialized right behind her. For a split second, I genuinely thought I copped the perfect opening. I lunged forward to execute the strike, but she completely vanished from my line of sight, materializing right behind my back the very next instant. Clowning my speed, she mocked, "Too slow, bro." She brought her katana down toward me, but checked her blade at the absolute last millisecond. She had zero intention of deleting me just yet. I instantly seized the window, using the opening to leap backward. She laughed it off and jeered, "Looks like my strike missed." I screamed back in pure rage, "Quit playing these trash games with me! If you wanted to, you could have deleted me on the very first play!" She replied without a single shred of hesitation, "Yeah, if I wanted to, I could have ended you on the first strike." But then she explained that she was no longer the person she used to be. She couldn't even recall her own name. She noted that the vast majority of her life memories had already been deleted, and the sheer emptiness left behind was constantly eating her up from the inside. She revealed that after taking the L in the past, heavy shackles were placed upon her. Hearing her story, it suddenly hit me that her setup was practically identical to mine. The only difference was that my physical structure had changed, whereas her body remained intact, but her memories and years of raw battle experience had been completely stripped away. The shackles bound around her neck were likely the exact ones the captain and Guan were yapping about earlier. She kept talking, stating that her name had been stolen from her, along with the very reason she had picked up a blade in the first place. Now, nothing but a hate-filled agony remained inside her. Suddenly, the entire aura radiating off her frame shifted drastically. I could distinctly feel her internal hatred scaling way heavier than before. But she had to pay a massive price for that emotional spike. Her technique and battle experience grew noticeably weaker than before. That was the exact window I was holding out for. I calculated that if she couldn't delete me in a single hit anymore, I still had a solid chance to secure the W. I decided there was absolutely zero point in capping about my strength anymore. It was time to dump every single asset I had into this clash. Looking at me, she was visibly stunned. Every single one of my gashes had fully regenerated, and pitch-black flames were spreading heavily across my entire frame. She noted, "So you pack a unique trait too." Then she caught onto another anomaly, realizing the black fire wasn't just burning away my wounds. It was incinerating something else entirely. I praised her for catching the play, then stated, "These black flames don't burn physical matter, bro. They burn abstract concepts. On the surface, it looks like this destruction packs zero limits, but that's cap. The grander the concept you try to incinerate, the more massive the mana pool required, and controlling it scales exponentially harder. I have to stay laser-focused every single second to ensure I don't eat the backlash myself. If this were my past life, I wouldn't have to stress about control at all." Then, locking eyes with her, I declared, "This time, I'm going to literally burn away the durability of this entire sector." Hearing my words, she looked completely perplexed, but I had zero intention of breaking down the logic for her right then. Without wasting a single millisecond, I gripped my spear and charged straight at her with maximum velocity. This time, I successfully managed to drive her backward. That gave me full confirmation that even her capabilities packed a strict threshold. Perhaps that was exactly why she noted, "If the fight has scaled this far, let's wrap it up outside." I was fully locked in. The next split second, we breached the exterior, and what followed next was absolute, unadulterated devastation. The two of us continuously lunged at each other, trading high-intensity blows. Buildings standing in our trajectory were structurally shattered to pieces, utility poles snapped, and anything that caught the crossfire was instantly reduced to mere debris. There was a critical moment where I got completely overwhelmed beneath her relentless onslaught of attacks, and my spear literally snapped clean in half. She immediately capitalized, executing a massive crescent slash that absolutely should have ended my run right there. But the strike missed. Shattering a massive boulder in my path, I closed the distance with lightning velocity, screaming like a lunatic as I drove my broken weapon straight into her torso. That single hit connected into a rapid succession of heavy strikes, sending her flying far into the distance. Witnessing the raw power behind that output, she looked at me and asked for the very first time, "Who on earth are you?" But I had zero time to give her a detailed breakdown. While she was still fumbling to recover from the previous assault, I executed a series of incredibly thin but pixel-perfect surgical cuts across her frame, completely tearing her structure apart. An agonizing shriek ripped from her lungs as the vast majority of her remaining life force began to fully deplete. Yet, she still refused to take the L. She charged back at me one last time, and our final strikes connected at the exact same millisecond. The only difference was that my blade sliced diagonally clean through her physical structure. We were both roaring in pure agony, but neither of us was prepared to take a single step back. At that exact moment, an old conversation from the other world flashed through my mind. Someone had once asked me, "What will you do if you ever face an opponent who matches your tier perfectly?" Back then, I had simply stated, "Once the dust settles, only one of us is walking back out on their own 2 feet." And that exact moment had arrived. I put my life on the line for the final play, dropping my most devastating, maximum output strike right onto her. That single attack completely drained every last drop of strength remaining in my body. But even so, a smirk spread across my face, because at the end of the day, I was the one still standing. As the female samurai's form began to gradually dissolve, the rift spawned a rare reward chest, identical to the drop I copped after clearing the Grade 2 core. Seeing that gave me a massive wave of relief, confirming that loot drops operate under the exact same principles in this world. I popped the chest open, but inside lay nothing but a solitary spearhead. Without wasting time, I hurled it away, then used my mana to pull it straight back to my hand. That's when I discovered I could manually adjust its length entirely on a whim. At that exact moment, I remembered that Rift rewards scale directly based on the headcount that entered the zone. For a hot second, I low-key regretted not telling Hanso to slide inside with me. Even if she had just camped out in a secure sector, she would have secured a premium reward drop too. Right then, my eyes caught the samurai's katana lying on the floor. The weapon hadn't dissolved along with her remains. Without a second thought, I copped the blade too. A little while later, I exited the rift checkpoints to find Hanso fast asleep, completely dead to the world. I tossed the katana straight toward her to snap her awake. Looking at the blade, she was visibly stunned, having never seen steel of that tier before. I simply muttered, "Found it on the way out." Judging by the raw skill of its previous owner, it's loud and clear this blade is top tier. She picked up the weapon, inspecting the quality closely, and admitted the craftsmanship was genuinely insane. She asked, "Where exactly did you cop this?" But at that point, I lacked the energy to even formulate a response. I simply muttered, "Don't stress about that. First, tell me, did you actually take a proper breather while I was gone?" Before I could utter another syllable, my vision completely faded to black, and I collapsed onto the floor, totally unconscious. Hanso panicked instantly. Right before the lights went out, I managed one final thought. Man, at the end of the day, I'm still human. FR. The news that a solo rookie had completely cleared a Grade 2 rift spread across the nation like absolute wildfire. The entire city was thoroughly shaken, mostly because deleting a rift that dangerous entirely solo wasn't an easy feat even for veteran, elite hunters. Within no time, my face was plastered across every single media outlet, and overnight, I became the most heavily discussed hunter in the game. When I finally opened my eyes, I found myself resting in a private hospital room. Clearing out undetected was basically statistically impossible now. A short while later, a woman wearing glasses stepped into the room. She introduced herself as George Sujame, stating she represented the Embargo Tower Secretariat. I told her to slide in and thanked her for covering my massive hospital bill, but I added, "Honestly, I've never heard of the Embargo Tower in my entire life." Sujame explained that their organization keeps a low profile since the vast majority of their operations are strictly tied to the ICT sector. Then she mentioned that if I faced any discomfort regarding the hospital facilities, I should let her know without hesitation. I replied that everything was solid, but I still had a burning question. I looked straight at her and said, "Look, nobody drops a heavy bag on a premium hospital bill for absolutely no reason. That means you want something from me, so let's quit the yapping. What is the actual play?" Before she could even drop the answer, she slid a slice of cake toward me. We both sat down, and that's when she finally spilled the actual tea. She explained that they were packing a shield generator, a high-tech device capable of dropping a massive barrier against corrosion creatures. Their organization desperately needed me to help escort that generator safely to its final destination. She mentioned it was a fresh prototype straight out of the US. If this test run succeeded and they kicked off mass production later, it could save countless lives in areas where hunters statistically can't pull up in time. In her book, this wasn't just another basic mission. It was a high-stakes play that could structurally change the fate of all humanity. I instantly realized the situation scaled way bigger than I thought. She added that this was a massive, large-scale operation, and they had already locked in multiple elite hunters for the job. I asked who else was on the roster, and she revealed that Janvi had already said yes to the mission. The second I heard that name, it clicked that this play was entirely out of this world. She broke down the entire blueprint for me. The shield generator was going to be shipped via train from Vladivostok. From there, it would head straight to the Netherlands. After that, a chopper would airlift it to the UK, where it would undergo its very first field test. I asked, why take such a wild, roundabout route just to test it in the UK? That's when she explained that one of the absolute most catastrophic great rifts on the planet, the Retrent, is located in Naples, Italy. The fallout from that single rift bleeds heavily across all of Europe and extends straight into North Africa. The UK is practically the only territory left standing, mostly because the surrounding ocean acts as a natural buffer. She went on to explain that Europe has completely fumbled. The local governments exist purely on paper now, while rogue hunter corporations have carved up and seized control of their own respective territories. Hearing that, I realized that a massive amount of eyes were going to be locked onto that train. Then she asked, "Have you ever actually traveled outside of Korea, bro?" I told her, "Nah, this is going to be my very first international trip." She warned me that we were bound to run into multiple high-risk situations along the way. I instantly asked what she meant by we, and she revealed that she was personally tag-teaming this mission with us. I told her straight up that I wanted Hanso to join our squad too, making it clear she's the one person I can fully trust to lock in when things go sideways. She agreed to the request without a second thought. For me, this was a massive win because it meant my personal influence was going to scale even higher. A little while later, I pulled up to the building's roof where a chopper was already on standby waiting for me. I found out it was personally dispatched by the association president himself. He passed along a message stating that after I soloed that Grade 2 rift, his entire perspective on me had completely shifted, and the association was now prepared to throw maximum support behind my every move. Hearing that felt pretty solid. My raw power was finally out in the open for everyone to see, and the grind was gradually getting easier. But at the exact same time, another question popped into my mind. Did the chairman know anything about Kim Jian and his rogue faction? And if he did, was he genuinely trying to fix this broken world, or did he just want to preserve the status quo? The second I vaulted into the chopper, I found Seiyin already chilling inside. She let out a laugh and mocked. Bro, your name has spread so hard by now that finding someone who hasn't heard of you is basically statistically impossible. I asked, where are we heading? She replied, the military base. When I asked for the reason, she explained that the South Korean military wanted to secure a piece of the action and become part of this mission. That made solid sense to me. If the operation succeeded down the line, nations wouldn't have to rely as heavily on hunters for national security as they used to. But I was absolutely certain that the top brass in South Korea wasn't entirely thrilled about the setup. I looked at her and asked, Yo, do you know anything about a group calling themselves the Descendants of Dang Gun? She instantly locked in and said, Yeah, they're a known terrorist organization. I revealed that I had bumped heads with them during the Sushma Island run. She noted that every single member of that faction is strictly Korean, and lately, they've been popping up out of nowhere across the map, especially right when hunters are on the verge of clearing a rift. They always show up at the absolute worst timing to interfere with the raid. I laid out my theory to her, and true to form, she just slid me another piece of candy. It made me wonder again why on earth she keeps hand-delivering candy to me every single time. Right then, she fired the exact same question Sujam had dropped earlier. Have you ever actually been outside of Korea before? I was low-key, surprised, and muttered, Nah, this is the first time. She noted, Well, this mission is going to teach you a whole lot, Lil Bro. A short while later, we touched down at the military base. The chief stepped up and announced it was time to officially kick off the briefing. He instructed everyone to analyze the documents provided and began breaking down the logistics of the entire operation. He introduced himself as the chief supervisor, On Seol. Then he revealed that the train convoy we were tasked to guard was a massive setup consisting of 80 cars in total. 65 of those cars were strictly reserved for hauling cargo and essential relief supplies, while the remaining 15 coaches were configured as living quarters for the hunters and the South Korean military detail. I internally figured I'd probably bag an entire coach all to myself. VVIP hunters always get that premium tier treatment, after all. The chief went on to explain that the specific coach housing the shield generator was strictly under the protection of Monkey LLC alongside a few hand-picked elite hunters. But Seiyin cut right in mid-sentence, stating that since it was an incredibly long trip, the guard shifts would need to be split evenly among the other teams and the military detail. Otherwise, everyone would run on fumes trying to pull guard duty continuously. However, she made it crystal clear that since the generator was Monkey LLC's direct responsibility, a massive number of factions would be targeting that specific coach. Because of that, absolutely nobody outside of Monkey LLC was permitted to step anywhere near that car. The chief looked a bit startled by her blunt shutdown, but he kept the ball rolling. Next, he started mapping out the exact hazards lining our route. The chief explained that our train would be barreling through multiple high-intensity sectors where the corrosion fallout had already spread heavily. There were 7 distinct choke points along the track where an alpha corrosion source was packed so close that an ambush could drop at any given millisecond. To make matters worse, the rogue criminal gangs roaming the Siberian wilderness were a massive threat on their own. Hearing that low-key made me laugh. No shot we were about to experience a literal train robbery, straight out of an old Western movie. The chief added that official notices had already been dispatched to Europe's 8 territory lords, but only 3 of them had actually bothered to send a reply. I instantly put the pieces together. That meant we had to treat the remaining 5 as straight enemies. The second he dropped that data, everyone in the room started frantically yapping among themselves. How many different factions were we going to have to throw hands with on a single run? Corrosion monsters, bandit gangs, and territory lords all pulling up at the same time? Is making it back alive from a mission like this even statistically possible? Honestly, the real answer was a straight no. Right then, Seiyin locked in to reassure the room, declaring, "Stop stressing. No matter what kind of chaos pulls up, I am personally delivering this train to its destination." When deployment day arrived, the entire roster gathered at the Vladivostok station. Everyone started boarding their designated cars. I was on the platform too, but the walk to reach the first-class coaches was so insanely long it completely ruined my mood. On the way down, I ran into Hanso. She mentioned that once this mission was officially wrapped up, she'd finally hand over that premium healing potion she had promised me. I looked at her and asked, "Yo, you've been completely ghosting lately. Where have you been hiding?" She shot back instantly. "Must be nice chilling in the first-class coaches all day, bro. How would a big-shot hunter like you even notice a regular rookie like me? Besides, I didn't see you pulling up either." Hearing her sass, I just let out a soft smirk. Honestly, the three of us were copping some crazy special treatment. Right around then, Sujame joined the huddle. She locked eyes with Hanso and remarked, "Wow, seeing you in person, your aura is low-key terrifying." Then she turned to me and noted, "You pulled up pretty early too. Have you checked out the train yet?" I nodded and said, "Just got here." From what I had analyzed so far, it was loud and clear that the embargo tower hadn't skimped on security at all. The entire train looked like a rolling fortress that was statistically impossible to breach. I asked, "Yo, isn't slapping this much heavy armor on the frame just going to turn us into a massive target out in the open?" Sujame shot down the concern, saying, "Nah, even if they lock onto us, it won't matter. These coaches are structurally reinforced with depleted uranium armor, exactly like high-tier military vehicles. It's way more secure than it looks." Hearing her breakdown made me feel like the run might actually go smoothly. Plus, with Sei-in holding down the fort, fumbling the mission seemed completely out of the equation. But I was dead wrong. We were barely 10 minutes into the departure when a massive monster ambush dropped on us. A hunter screamed over the comms, "We need immediate backup on Coach 57. Without wasting a single millisecond, I bolted toward the sector. I muttered to myself, the train hasn't even fully cleared the station yards, and an entire horde of corrosion monsters is already sliding on us. The enemy headcount just kept scaling up with no end in sight. If Sei-in had been out on the lines, throwing hands with us, clearing the crowd would have been light work, but she was completely out of the picture. Further down the line, sections of the Siberian railway tracks had been completely shattered, meaning the team had to structurally repair the tracks in real time while the train kept moving. The maintenance crew obviously couldn't fight off corrosion monsters on their own, so they needed an elite hunter to pull babysitting duty 24/7, and that exact high-priority task was assigned to Sei-in. Honestly, if I was running the logistics for this operation, I would have fired whoever cooked up that trash strategy on day one. I soloed dozens of monsters entirely on my own, but mid-fight, I started deeply regretting my lifestyle choices. This trip was going to scale way longer and become far more exhausting than I ever anticipated. Meanwhile, across the wastes of Russia, a man was dragging the massive carcass of a high-tier boss monster through the snow. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto a figure standing nearby, and he grumbled under his breath about the fake pulling up again. Right at that exact millisecond, the beast he assumed was fully dead suddenly snapped awake and lunged straight for his skull. But the guy didn't panic for a single second. He casually whipped out his hand cannon and deleted the monster in a single, devastating blast. The moment the beast took the ultimate L, he looked over at the group standing ahead and muttered, "Nikolai is always executing some unhinged crazies out of nowhere." This man was none other than Hyan. He walked up and said, "It's been a hot minute since we last linked up. I brought a gig for you this time." But the scene he walked into upon arrival was pretty wild itself. Standing right in front of him was Nikolai Baron, the absolute territory lord of Vladivostok. Nikolai barked an insult back, snapping, "You absolute idiot! I intentionally left that monster breathing. That was literally supposed to be my dinner tonight." Hayun laughed it off and jeered, "Bro, clean the blood off your face first before you start yapping. Seriously, do you guys actually eat monsters out here in Russia?" Then he shifted the conversation straight to business. "Look, a transport train is about to clear Vladivostok. It's set to barrel straight through this exact sector within the next day or two." Nikolai burst out laughing and mocked, "Quit playing, bro! The Siberian Railway was structurally demolished years ago." Hayun shot back, "Among the people whose mana circuits have awakened, there are individuals who can literally repair tracks in real time while moving. All they need is the raw materials." Hearing that, Nikolai was genuinely flabbergasted. He demanded, "All right, fine. But what exactly is loaded on that train to make it that special?" Hayun didn't give him a direct breakdown. Instead, he dropped a heavier piece of data. What matters way more is the entity guarding the cargo. Sei-in from Monkey LLC, the candy lady herself. The exact millisecond he dropped that name, Nikolai's eyes went wide. He asked, "So you already calculated that Sei-in would be holding down this mission, and you've already mapped out a play for it?" Hayun simply gave a firm nod. A massive, sinister smirk spread across Nikolai's face as he muttered, "Raiding a train under Saiyan's personal protection? Oh yeah, that run is going to be absolutely elite."